Or shot fire, officer down, shot fire, officer down. Got a city officer down, shot fire.
223, be advised, we have a visual on enemy paratroopers in grid Papa uniforms.
Welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation, a podcast dedicated to inspiring hope and healing for first responders, military veterans, and anyone facing PTSD and trauma. Hey guys, welcome to another podcast episode of the Resilient Warrior Nation. I'm your host, Mike Morgan. Very excited about today's guest. As I do always, though, I like to explain why I wear this shirt. This is not a proclamation. Unafraid is the name of a company owned by a man named Eddie Penny. And as I sat down and watched a podcast episode in the spring of 23, Sean Ryan podcast more specifically, I had no idea that Eddie was about to literally change the entire trajectory of my life. I'm a 30-year retired police officer. At that time, I'd probably been retired for almost a year. I had been going through bouts of sadness, anger, rage, depression. Was unsure as to their origination, but as I sat down and watched that podcast episode of Sean Ryan and him interviewing Eddie Penny, Eddie was speaking about the Extortion 17 incident in which a Chinook was shot down in Afghanistan, killing all 38 aboard, including 17 SEALs. It was their largest loss of community in one event ever. And as Eddie told the story of losing his best friend, Jason Workman, in that incident, I simultaneously began thinking about a call I had buried 5 years before about a 2-year-old found floating in a pool. Beautiful girl named Dana Sikorsky. And as Eddie became visibly upset telling this story, I began crying like a baby. There's no other better way to say it. And I kind of put two and two together, realized I had suffered some sort of PTS in my career, knew I didn't want to be this ornery guy who hated everyone and everything. So raised my hand. I wanted to heal, began investigating healing modalities, found psychedelic medicines, which I had seen for probably 2 years. Up to that point, I dismissed them as kind of hocus pocus, but really began paying attention and realized that mostly special force operators that were talking about their consequent healing journeys after coming back from war, broken men, were some of the most strongest men in the world from a mental fortitude perspective. And who was I to dismiss these medicines? I then ended up journeying with ayahuasca in March of 2024. It literally changed my life. The universe at the end of my first journey told me that it healed me. Again, this is not a linear thing where you just heal. I still go through things like everyone else on a daily basis, but for all intents and purposes, I was healed, and my life's purpose was to go forth and help other first responders and vets heal theirs. I said yes, having no idea how I was going to implement that, but one thing I decided to do was to start a podcast, to do for others what Sean Ryan did for me. So in that vein, I want to introduce my next guest. He is Mark Jackson. Mark was born in Kenya and spent the first 4 years of his life both there and in Liberia, where his father was a Peace Corps country director. Mark and his family had to leave due to civil war and relocated to Minnesota, where he spent most of his formative years in college. Studying biology and pre-med at Macalester College in St. Paul, Mark wanted to go to medical school. After college, he received a research fellowship to study neuroscience at the National Institutes of Health and parlayed that into entering a PhD program at Johns Hopkins. He quit that to move to Haiti to volunteer with Sean Penn as an EMT after the 2010 earthquake. He followed that with a stint in London at an NGO for microfinance loans for women, which brought him to Afghanistan for a stint and back home to Kenya for a bit as well. He then moved to Canada, pick up a master's in global health, which qualified him to work for the United Nations/World Health Organization. Mark's first job there was a technical officer for management of the dead, managing thousands of casualties and mass graves resulting from Typhoon Haiyan in 2014. PTSD diagnoses from that work did not stop Mark from continuing onto other emergencies in Timor, vaccinating children for polio and measles, and then onto Fiji, coordinating logistics for the 21 island countries in the Pacific during the Zika virus outbreak. After hitting a wall, he moved back to the States. When COVID came along, Mark ended up back in Minnesota and spent 3 years on the front lines as director of COVID testing and vaccination for the capital city, St. Paul. Once that ended, he relocated to San Diego, where he's been facilitating Ibogaine, mushroom, and 5 MEO DMT retreats at the Mission Inn in Tijuana for the last couple of years. Mark's also the director of operations for the clinic and has also helped out at Amio in their Parkinson's neuro program. Mark drank his way through all of the work, all of the PTS, and has been sober for 7 years. These medicines have helped him regain clarity, peace of mind, and a sense of connection that has been missing for 20 years of struggling with depression, anxiety, and PTS, while treating those with numbing through substance abuse. Mark, great to have you on the podcast, brother. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, brother. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Mark and I are also fellow students in the Being True to You Psychedelic Integration Coaching course, which is how we met. And I remember the first time we all met with Tova. She is our group mentor. I just caught the end of Mark speaking about something. I was like, God damn, this guy knows his stuff, man. So he's only impressed me more since then. But brother, it's great to have you on the podcast. That is some bio. I've never read one like that. The places you've been, the things you've seen, the things you've done are incredible, bro. Truly incredible. Like, what a life you've lived so far.
Been very fortunate, had a lot of opportunities, go help other people, travel the world and help people. I mean, what more do you want to do, right? And
absolutely,
all credit. My parents, if I had been born in a different place to different parents, I'd probably be, selling advertising or something like that. Instead, I get to do this and travel around and help people. And, just very fortunate, very privileged, and very aware of the toll that it exacts as well. More so nowadays.
Yeah, because it's these things aren't done in a vacuum. You're a human being having all these experiences, many of them traumatic. And did mom or dad ever prepare you when you were young, as you were kind of going into this, to kind of pay attention to maybe the toll it would exact, or the fact that these things are not easily dismissed?
My dad tried to warn me. Absolutely. It's funny. The last place that he was working was Haiti. That's the first place I worked.
Okay.
The reason for that is when we returned from Liberia, the Peace Corps needed someone to go to Haiti to shut it down because there's so many coups happening from the military there in Haiti. And so my dad was sent there for 1 month just to shut it down. He said that's the worst place I've ever been. So a little while later, a couple decades after that, lo and behold, a huge earthquake hits there in 2010. And at this point, I'm on track with a fully funded PhD to Johns Hopkins, and everything's clicking, and things are going well. But at the same time, I have this itch that hasn't been scratched. And I grew up on stories of him crashing through the bush in Africa and things like that. And so I said, Dad, I can't do this anymore. I can't live this lab life. I'm gonna go to Haiti. And he was just like, no, please don't. I know what's gonna happen here. And there's a level of unrestricted freedom there that you can get yourself into pretty big trouble, right? And nobody trains you for this. No one trained my dad when he went overseas for the first time as a Peace Corps volunteer in Niger, and for the isolation and the drinking that comes from that. And then in Kenya, then Liberia, then in Haiti. There's no real training for that, right? There's probably some courses or something like that you go through and you click through the little things, but you're not really registering this, right? You're focused on the adventure. Like, here we go. And we'll deal with the repercussions later. Stuff it down, move forward, execute tasks. Let's help these people get it done. It's easy.
That's what we do.
It's easy for us, for guys like this, right? So yeah, he tried to warn me, and I was, I didn't believe him. Then lo and behold, a little while later, it's exactly as he said. The toll was there, and the drinking crept up on me, and So, with the UN and NGOs, there's often not a focus on the training for the first responders. They do their best, obviously, but in the moment, hey, I got a spot on this roster right now. You want to go help out here or not? Yeah, let's go. Sure. You're not stopping somewhere for 3 weeks to have a training session on your own mental health, right? You're on the phone.
Oh, yeah.
You're gone, and deal with it later. So, yeah, you have to learn the hard way, right? You can only learn that lesson one way, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Two things. One, do you have any siblings?
I have a twin brother, and I have a little brother as well. My little brother is a firefighter in Juneau, Alaska, and my twin brother lives in Denver, Colorado, and he works in the emergency response area as well.
Okay, so he was into it as well. Now, did you, growing up, see any of these things manifesting with your parents, as far as the stress and what they were going through on a daily basis, kind of affecting them?
To an extent, it was probably more stress than anything, just having 3 boys. I mean, we were a terror, right? I got scars all over my face from my brother, just from the fights and things like that. And, trying to raise 3 of us in Liberia, pretty challenging on parents. But, I had a fairly, other than the Africa stuff, pretty normal childhood. My parents are still together. I love them to death. We're a close-knit family. Irish Catholic heritage. I'm not personally religious myself, but we have a big family, and it's huge. Very important for us.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, it's been interesting. My twin brother both of us are moving through these experiences. He worked in Uganda as well, and didn't quite get into the same level of extreme stuff that I was doing, and so he had more structure. And so it's been interesting. There's a lot of guilt initially because I have basically the same DNA, right? We're twins.
Yeah,
He might have the alcoholism as bad as I did. And I was like, well, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Why don't I have the willpower? And so that's been interesting, but he's been very supportive. And yeah, we're extremely close, both my brothers. And yeah, for the most part, yeah.
That's fantastic. Excuse the dogs, by the way. I don't have no one else in the house to take them out for me.
Well, you got dogs in the background. I got airplanes in the background. I'm riding the flight path to San Diego. So,
all right, listeners, I apologize. Gives it much character though. So let me ask you a question now. How do you guys go from where you were to St. Paul? Is that where a bunch of your family was located?
Not remotely. We had to leave Liberia. My parents did have a house in D.C. where the federal government has their Peace Corps offices. My mom was also coordinating Vista volunteers. So they relocated to D.C., but quickly realized they're like, we don't want to live in the Beltway. This is not it. We're not going to raise 3 kids here in Maryland, in Bethesda. Actually, weirdly enough, the house we landed in after Liberia was 2 blocks away from NIH, from the lab I worked in after college. So
really
interesting coincidence there. But they quickly realized this is not it. So after about 9 months in D.C., my dad got a job in Minnesota, and he heard there were good schools there. He said, that's enough for me, let's go. And he was the director of the Corporation for National Service, which is the federal government's parent organization for AmeriCorps and foster grandparents and Vista volunteers, other federally funded service projects for volunteering in the community and community advancement in Minnesota.
Okay.
So we had no other connections to it. My dad was raised mostly in Ohio, my mom in New York, so we knew nobody in Minnesota, and it couldn't be more different culturally or climate-wise from Liberia to move to the coldest state in the country.
Brother, my cousins and I used to go every January to Minneapolis for the U.S. Pond Hockey Championships. I think we went there for about 6 years, and 2 years in a row, it was negative 45 wind chill. I remember one of the games, I'm pulling my helmet, just pulling it down over my skull cap, and the earpiece breaks off my hand. That's how brittle it was. It was insane. I'm like, how do people live like this? But I actually we loved the place because it's geared to be outside in the wintertime, like ice fishing, ice hockey, cross-country skiing. Everything is geared for you to be out there. New York, it's just cold enough to keep you inside, but there's nothing to do outside. I love the place, and Minnesota nice is a thing. They are the nicest people in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you can get into the outdoor activities and get the right jackets, there's no shortage. Cross country skiing, ice hockey, hiking. I mean, it's a beautiful state. Fantastic place to grow up. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it is fantastic. Is right. So, all right, let me go to you're in the PhD program now. It's not working out for you. You tell Dad you're going to Haiti. How do you end up with Sean Penn, bro?
Yeah, I was just looking for. I mean, you don't really have a lot of qualifications there, right? I was not an EMT at the time. It's just kind of I just had this urge to help and get out there and get out in the world. And the PhD was cool. It was fully funded. I got all the it was gonna be awesome. But at the same time, it just wasn't satisfying, and I knew I needed to change it up. So this was the opportunity. Just started searching online for organizations that were down there and taking volunteers. And JPHRO, Sean's organization that he stood up, right off the bat when he got down there, they were taking volunteers, and they called me back, and I said, yeah, let's go. So jumped on a plane a couple weeks later, and the rest is history. So started down there for a couple weeks, and then realized that we had 55,000 people living on a 9-hole golf course in downtown Port-au-Prince.
Wow.
So the 82nd Airborne had come in and dug some trenches it's on a slope, dug some trenches for the shit and all the debris to wash down, and then everyone had a 10 by 10 little plot where they could create a 2x4 and tarp structure. No one wanted to go back inside because the aftershocks were still happening. So no one wanted to go back indoors. They didn't trust it. So they actually preferred to live in a tarp and 2x4 structure. So food security and the medical clinic were kind of what was created around to support that camp. And then we lived kind of in this huge circus tent at the top of it, and each person had their own little individual camping tent, and including Sean. And like, despite being this massive 2-time Oscar winner celebrity, he lived right in the tent with us, and we were eating pizza with him and everything. Like, other celebrities were showing up, taking a quick photo. Here we go, I was here, and then they fly out. Right? Sean lived there. Right? He lived in that tent, and brought his kids down. Like, brought a lot of attention. One of the big things that he provided was the attention. You know, the news was really interested in what was happening there, but 10 times better if Sean Penn, of all people, was the ambassador.
Yeah.
Right? He actually took an official position with the Haitian government afterwards. He was the ambassador at large for the country. It's somewhat of a failed state at this point. You know, it exists on a map, but it's pure chaos there. At the time, there was a UN peacekeeping force there, MINUSTA. It was the only peacekeeping force in the hemisphere at the time. So it did provide a modicum of safety and security things. It also created some real problems because they introduced, accidentally, cholera to that situation when the peacekeepers came over from Nepal. So pretty hit or miss there with the peacekeepers. Other than that, yeah, Sean was basically just, we were all just doing our best. And I was...
Can you tell us, like, what you're seeing on a daily basis? Like, you know, you're going out and just kind of describe for people, like, what...
Yeah, I mean, we're mostly in the camp to start with, and I was up in the medical clinic part of it just as my orientation. I was always interested in that. And I quickly realized, like, you know, I'm not being a lot of value here because I don't have any skills. So what I did is I basically said, I'm coming back, but I got to go to the U.S. real quick. And I found a wilderness EMT program where the quickest certification you can get is an EMT basic, right?
That's what I was, brother.
Instead of like 6 months at community college, you can do it in 3.5 weeks at Knowles, at National Outdoor Leadership School. So wow. I flew to of all places, Lander, Wyoming, and Grand Teton National Park in the middle of dead winter in December, and learned how to splint bones with ski poles and stuff. Everyone in my cohort were all doing it for ski patrol, and I was like, I'm doing this to move to a tropical island. And it was pretty wild, but yeah, I got that cert, moved through it real quickly, and immediately got back down to Haiti, and then kind of took over this small NGO, and we were basically just, ad hoc EMS system. There is no ambulance system in Port-au-Prince, right? So we had a pickup truck, and we would just get calls from the hospitals, and we'd go around, pick people up, move them around. We'd just be driving home, going to the grocery store, whatever, and we'd just see somebody on the side of the road with an ice pick sticking out of their chest. So we'd pick them up and do our best and move them, and moving cholera patients around and shit. I mean, it was wild. The group I was working with were Marines, so they had to redeploy to Afghanistan in the middle of it, but they had brought a bunch of weapons in. So they're like, here's the keys to the truck, here's a SIG, you put this in the truck, here's an MP5 that goes under your pillow, and I'm a lab rat, I'm a science nerd, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, and they booked it back to Bagram, and there I was. So just handling stuff and taking calls, and we'd go flying around on little missionary airlines, air flights up to Port-au-Prince, up to Cap Haitian, and bring children back who needed medical exams in Port-au-Prince and all that stuff. So flying around through the countryside, driving around, just whatever was needed,
Right.
And just really, really interesting. I think at some point, it was an adventure, unrestricted drinking. Everyone there is for the right reason, right? We all have the same mindset. We're there to help out, but at the same time, we're all pretty young, and like, you got to let loose a little bit too to let off some steam, right? So
hell yeah.
We hit it pretty hard with the rum, real nice rum in Haiti, and there's no one there to tell me no.
Yep.
So that was awesome at the time. Made a lot of really close friends there I'm still in touch with, but at some point, if you don't manage that, and I certainly wasn't, I wasn't aware of it. I was like, I'm bulletproof, let's just fucking go. At one point we picked up a hit and run victim off the side of the road at like 11 in the morning, and we took him to hospital, and we tried to stabilize him. I'm sitting there working the bag, and they hit him with 8 shots of adrenaline trying to get his heart restarted, and the whole time he's leaking CSF and blood out of his ear into my crop, right into my shoe. And
really,
I couldn't really move very much because I was bagging him, and so I kind of looked down, my foot's sloshing around in it. I'm like, oh, that's kind of gross. And eventually they called it, couldn't do anything more. This guy clearly had significant brain trauma. Went home and had lunch, had a beer. That was it. That's not how human beings are supposed to react to something like that.
No, it's not how you're supposed to.
Numbness was there, right? That was my first sign, like, oh, this is not normal, right? I should be feeling something for this. There should be more.
Yeah.
But at that point, I had been in fight or flight so long, and I'd just been in this like hyper vigilant mode that. And I know this now. At the time, I of course didn't know this, but that was my first real encounter with that. And a little while later, I said, okay, this is enough time. And and got out of there. So all told, I was down there for about 7 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
7 months of hell, essentially, in some respects.
It was fascinating. It was the adventure I was looking for, and I was hooked. The adrenaline, the validation, the satisfying work. It was perfect. I was like, hell yeah, this is it. And so a friend of mine that I went to college with, his boss was on the board of a charity that was based in London. They were doing microfinance for women. Not my forte, right? Microfinance, I'm a health guy. And they're like, well, we just need somebody who can travel around to our projects in Afghanistan and Kenya and South Africa and India. And, like, fuck, I can do that in my sleep. Let's do it. And so I moved to London and started working with them. Went over to Afghanistan in 2012 for a little visit.
How was that, brother?
I mean, it's pretty interesting, right? My cousin at the time was a captain in the army, and he was down fighting in Helmand province, and I'm flying into Kabul and popping up to Mazar-i-Sharif to do these little site visits and hand out some cash to these women who are trying to start their own businesses. And it was a really well thought out project. Like, the idea is there. It's actually based on the Grameen Bank model in Bangladesh, and then Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Prize for this model of microfinance. He's actually now the de facto leader of Bangladesh since the coup last year. So the model is intact in certain cultures where these small loans, and women don't typically have access to capital in a lot of these countries, right? They don't get loans from banks. So if you can hand out even a $200 loan, they can buy a goat, they can create a small business and then pay back the loan and create something more self-sustaining. What they're lacking is that initial capital. So that was the goal there. And Afghanistan doesn't work so well for cultural reasons. For one, charging interest, which banking depends on, is haram, not allowed. And then also just the instability of it wasn't great. We showed up looking to talk with our beneficiaries, and they're like, oh, they're in the other room, don't worry, we'll take the money, you're good. And of course, they're holding AKs, and we're sitting there with our little pens, so what are we going to do, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely fun adventure, super cool. Obviously, I didn't tell my parents until the day before I left because I didn't want them worrying, even though I'd known for a little while that I was going to go. And yeah, just another adventure. Tick that off. It was super interesting. Of course, when I got over there, it wasn't like you see on CNN, right? There's really nice people, everyone hospitable. I was obviously not in the Taliban-controlled areas. Like, the capital was fairly secure, and Mazar-i-Sharif up on the northern border was, relatively safe. So it wasn't like I was, dodging bullets or anything like that. But our fixers.
How you received
our fixers got blown up the next week. After I left, our fixers got blown up the next week.
Did it really? Wow.
Yeah. And so it was unsafe. It was definitely unstable. I probably should have been a lot more worried than I was. Put it that way.
It's good to be young and stupid, though, sometimes, brother. Ignorance is bliss.
Lesson, man.
Yeah.
No one's
exactly.
going to
Now, how are the men in Afghanistan receiving this? Because I know they're
a little bit of skepticism.
Women,
it's just kind of like, we were not dealing with people in the in the tribal areas, right? It was they were educated, they spoke English, or at least we had translators and things. But yeah, at the end of the day, it was interesting. But I was pretty sure it became pretty clear after a while, Mike, that this working in microfinance and doing this was not my forte. So I wanted to move back toward health, and then I had the opportunity at the time. Global health was not a big theme. But there was a program in Canada that had a global health degree, and their master's degrees are the British system, so it's a year plus experiential instead of 2 years. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. I can get this done in a year and get my ass back out there onto the next adventure. So moved up there, and McMaster University in Hamilton is kind of their best. It's like the best medical school, health sciences university in Canada, and in the greater Toronto area. It's in a little town called Hamilton, but it's part of the Toronto area. Ticked off a year there, pretty intensive, and then went and did some research in India, and then did my internship. My research project for that degree was in Nepal, working for WHO on mental health. And then got my degree. Actually, I take that back. 4 days before I was gonna get my master's degree, I was already flying back to Toronto to go to the graduation ceremony. Typhoon Haiyan hit in the Philippines. And I got a call from an NGO that I had worked with in the past. I had gone over to the Philippines for like a week, just drop off some aid supplies a couple years before. And that group, I got a call, and they're like, hey, this massive storm just hit. At the time, it was the strongest recorded storm that had hit land. And like, we're gonna send a team over in 24 hours. Do you wanna be on it? And I said, absolutely. And I just hung up the phone and canceled the flight to Canada, and got on the plane and rolled up in there. And we connected with somebody who was linked to the public health, basically their Secretary of Health, and got 2 slots. Actually, we got 10 slots on a plane on the first commercial airliner landing in Tacloban, which is ground zero for this storm that had hit. And the moment that the George Washington Carrier Group, Joint Task Force 505, came in out of Okinawa to clear the runway and stabilize things, and the moment the runway was clear, we landed and just started working. And we brought search and rescue dogs over from the U.S. and started searching. There's just bodies everywhere. The storm had come in and just absolutely wrecked shop. And the way the islands there are, the geography actually funneled the storm right into this town, and there's about 400,000 people there, and it was just absolute chaos. So with a storm like that, it's not the wind damage that gets people, it's the wave. So it's basically a tsunami, right? It's pushing all this water inland, so you get this huge wave. So if you didn't make it to higher ground in time, you drowned. And so that's where all the bodies were, just interspersed in all this rubble. And our human remains detection dog was going nuts, just find after find after find. I mean, thousands, right? So we quickly had to figure out where we were going to sleep tonight. The U.S. military had kind of secured their area and controlled the airspace around the airport, but obviously we can't be inside the wire. And so we just went out, and the first place we stopped was a warehouse, and it was just completely flooded out, and bodies floating everywhere. So we couldn't stay there. We ended up at a hospital that had a generator, one of the few places that had lights on. And they're like, yeah, you can stay here. And they gave us a room. So we just had these filthy, just absolutely reeking search and rescue dogs, a couple other EMTs and firefighters, and we just crashed out. And then we starting to get in the rhythm there. We noticed across the street this big compound with big walls, and these helicopters kept dropping in and out, and private helicopters. And we're like, oh, these guys must have some kind of power, and these huge trucks are going in and out all the time. And by the way, the airport there is Romualdez Airport. The streets, everything is named Romualdez. And we're like, this is interesting. And we quickly realized, a couple weeks in, we realized that the mayor, the congressman, everybody is part of this family that runs that area. And that's their hometown, that's their bailiwick. And they invited us over, and they said, hey, we know what you guys are doing in the city. We really appreciate this. And any resources you guys need, we're here to help. And so you can use the helicopter whenever you want. You can use the trucks whenever you want. And by the way, I'm the congressman, so any political power that you need, that's how things run over there. So I was like, okay. At this point, I was still working for an NGO, and at around this time, the UN quickly kind of realized that, okay, we have this huge problem with the amount of dead bodies everywhere in this town. And it's not a hygiene problem, actually. Even if they're in the water supply, it's more of a mental health problem. So the UK government had funded WHO to deal with this. And they needed somebody who knew the local politicians and had already been working on the problem. And so they approached me. And by this time, I had, fresh off the printer, my master's in global health. And they're like, okay, well, you're what we're looking for. We need somebody to come on board and deal with this and be a liaison from WHO to the local government. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so got hired on the spot and just started, to continue the work. There were some political sensitivities, though, that because we realized afterwards that Romualdez is the maiden name of Imelda Marcos. And Imelda Marcos and Ferdinand Marcos, currently the president, Bong Marcos, is the son of those two, right? And at the time when I was there, it was the Aquino family in charge. So there's a huge blood feud between those families.
Okay.
So, federal level, the Aquinos controlled things. At ground zero, where I was, their sworn enemies controlled things. And so, yeah, there's an interesting political game there that needed to be played. Meanwhile, obviously the death toll was a very sensitive issue, and it was just a really, really, really sensitive thing to work on outside of your normal scope. So most aid workers are going in to work on water, sanitation, hygiene, or education, or shelter, or food, or something. There's no normal job where you're the technical officer for management of the dead. So a lot of it was just learning on the fly, right? Spending a lot of time up in those mass graves. When we weren't going around the city picking up dead bodies, we were just trying to help out as much as we could with any kind of logistics and things. Eventually, in the rainy season there, things kind of, came to a head with the mass grave situation. And a lot of what we ended up doing after the acute phase was over was actually unearthing those mass graves and getting each corpse into its individual grave, so that in a very highly Catholic country there, instead of paying their respects to their lost loved ones in this pit, they could go to an individual grave. Well, at this point in the rainy season, the bodies had decomposed so much that they're you couldn't identify them, right? So we're just picking these bones out of this pit, putting them in we were trying to isolate DNA from survivors' cheek swabs, matching those with sections of femur bone, but that project didn't work out so well, just due to logistical issues. But we did our best to helped them create this massive graveyard. Just really, really amazing work. Obviously unprepared for it, especially on the mental health front. Working.
Yeah, how are you navigating this, brother? Because I've been
I wasn't
in death and destruction for years, but it was nothing compared to that.
Yeah, I mean, you're not meant to. I can still see the first time, like I came right onto like the first decomposed body. It's jarring, and then your brain is like, well, it doesn't matter if it's jarring, dude. We got to execute these tasks, so you just go numb, right? You just flip the switch. Absolutely. The problem is you don't flip that switch back off, right?
Yep.
And so I had the honor and the pleasure of working side by side, shoulder to shoulder with a lot of incredibly dedicated people. Both international aid workers who were flying in, but also local government officials and local citizens who were just committed to this work. So that is self-sustained. That sustains me, right? Like we're all there for some reason. That drive to help people. We're all moving in the same mission, all moving forward. The problem is I just didn't know what to do to take care of myself when I wasn't working, right? And so alcohol, genetically there's a predisposition there with Irish Catholics. But at the same time, like I didn't really know what else to do. And there's a lot of boredom too when you're off, right? If you're not working and you're not hanging out, there's only so many things to do, right? And so drinking got out of hand for sure. And at one point, a year down the road, on the year anniversary of the storm, I distinctly remember things had stabilized enough where they threw this like kind of thank you thing for the aid workers and the people who had come in, local Filipinos as well, but a lot of the international aid workers. And since I had been there longer than any other aid worker, usually you rotate through every 3 months or 6 months. I had been there for a full year at this point. And so they gave me, Imelda came down and she's sitting there and they're like, that's your spot right up there. And it was pretty surreal.
You next to Imelda?
Yeah, all of them.
All right.
You
asked about her shoes?
He was a senator at the time. Yeah, her shoe collection had been washed out by the storm. But yeah, I mean, all these heavy hitters were there, big political, they're all driving in armored vehicles for safety and things. And I'm sitting there like, okay, this is great, And my boss from WHO was there, and my mentor, and he'd come down to support because I think he knew that this was going to be a lot for me. And at some point in the festivities, he just looked over, and I just wasn't handling things. And he's like, "You need to leave, right?" And I was like, "I need to go now." And so he pulled the our vehicle up, and we went back to my house, and I just bawled. A year of emotion, just, and between pulls on the vodka bottle, just like all this coming up, right? And I didn't know what to make of that, right? But it was just burnout, and about a month after that, ended up going back to the U.S. and I went to the doctor for the first time, and they're like, dude, Jesus, no wonder you can't sleep, dude. You have PTSD, and you got to quit drinking and like all this stuff. And they're like, here's an SSRI and here's some other prescriptions, and I don't know. So yeah, it took
how did
the
SSRIs work out? I'm curious.
I'd been on a few before, but it just didn't do anything. Maybe 6 months, and you kind of tell yourself there's a placebo effect, but the side effects are bad too, and it just never did anything for me. So a few months.
I can't believe there's no mental health compulsory counseling for you guys through your organization while you're over there.
Here's the thing. So if you're UN staff, there's more support, but if you're on the emergency roster, it's like short-term contracts. So you're just going in, and you're not supposed to stay there for a year. But I had this really niche role, and there weren't that many other people who were willing to raise their hand and be like, yeah, I'll go work on the dead body situation. That's a fucking terrible job.
Oh hell yeah.
So well, someone's got to do it. So I just stayed, and part of that is my own ego, like, oh, I'm the man for the job, and that's a really good sign of burnout when you're the only one who can do it, right? When you're the one who's responsible, right?
Yep.
And I know that now, but at the time I was just like, no, I got to do this, and also, I was just addicted to the adrenaline from it and the rush and just being of service and being important, really, Mike. That's what it was, is you feel like, okay, I'm important. I'm useful.
Yeah.
I'm needed, right? And so that's
People don't talk about that enough, bro. Like in first responder community, I didn't realize it after I retired. Like no one's coming to me for help anymore. People
You're
are always
somebody.
looking at you. Yeah, you're the man. You're going to solve this problem. We need you. And now there's no one calling anymore. And it's tough, man, for an identity.
Absolutely. For sure, right? The validation you get from that, the external validation you get from that is enough if you don't have that internal validation, right? If you don't love yourself or you don't like yourself, you need that external part, right? And so that's one of the big lessons that I learned later on, especially from plant medicines. Like the external validation only goes so far, right?
Exactly. Today's episode is brought to you by Cutting Edge Testosterone Therapy, a veteran-owned, family-run clinic led by a retired first responder. At Cutting Edge, they help men and women rebuild strength, focus, and vitality through advanced hormone therapy, peptides, and performance-based weight management. Whether you've served your country, your community, or your family, Cutting Edge helps you get your edge back safely, professionally, and with people who understand what service takes out of you. Cutting Edge offers individualized care with no monthly fees or contracts. Learn more at cuttingedgetestosteronetherapy.com. Cutting Edge Testosterone Therapy, built by those who serve for those who still do. Well, I tracked it back to my childhood due to the beauty and help of plant medicines. So I was able to figure out why I needed that validation because I never got it from my father. So I was looking outwardly for it because, internally it wasn't there. And it was funny because when I was talking to DJ Shipley, I went for training with his company and we got into a long discussion about a healing journey. And he told me that he realized after Ibogaine that all of his trauma was from childhood. And I looked at him like, bro, you're a Team 6 guy. You've killed men. You've seen your buddies killed. You see carnage on a massive scale. I'm like, childhood? And he's like, he's like 5 to 10% my career. The rest is childhood. And I was still skeptical until I went to Ibogaine myself. And I texted DJ a week or two after I got out. I'm like, brother, you were 100% right. I'm like, 90 to 95% of my trauma was childhood. 30-year police careers, maybe 5 to 10%. That's it.
Right. Yeah, and we see this play out time and time again, right? Folks show up thinking they know what their problem is, what's been holding them back. No, the medicine will surprise you. And it's fascinating how that works. I had a little bit different experience with the medicine. Nothing really too traumatic came up from my childhood. Like I have no complaint. My parents are fucking incredible. I got all the support in the world. We're public servants, right? Lived in a pretty normal middle class existence. Dad provided everything financially for us, right? And got to college and all that. So zero complaints about that. But still something was missing, right? Still this all that PTS from work and things was layered on top of depression and anxiety and this feeling of a fear of not being enough and things like that. And where that comes from, still working on that, right? Long process there, but nothing popped up to me it came back to this from childhood, except for the lack of a spiritual connection. So I'll get to that in a minute when we get into the IV and stuff. But
absolutely,
career-wise, I was able to rationalize a lot of my drinking by saying, well, who's going to say shit to me, right? Hey, dude, you're drinking too much. Yeah, well, it's because I just got back from the Philippines burying bodies, motherfucker. What have you been doing? Right, exactly. So that's my armor. That's my excuse, right? No one's going to say shit to me. Really convenient, right? If you love drinking. And perfect. You love being numb, right? And guess what else is? Further deployments where no one's there to tell you what's what. So a few months after the Philippines, kind of rest, reset, and then get another call. East Timor is popping off. We need somebody to go over there. Actually, excuse me, let me take that back. Ebola was happening in West Africa, and World Food Program needed someone to go over there and help out with part of the response in Freetown in Sierra Leone. And so got that lined up. And once you're on a roster, once they know you're reliable, then you just start getting these calls.
They'll keep calling you. Okay.
Yep. And so again, I'm not a UN employee. I'm a short-term contractor essentially. The UN employee folks are longer term, so they'll be on these 2-year contracts or longer, and they do have those employee benefits and support and things like that. They have mental health counselors because you're usually affiliated with an office in a normal city, not out in the field, right? And so I'm not trying to say that the UN was negligent or anything like that. That's just not how it works. Here's your 3-month contract. You're taking care of your own insurance, right? We're trusting that you're going to show up and then you're going to take care of yourself afterwards. They're not really calculating in people like me who don't want to do that. I just want to keep going. I want to live in the red. I want to rev it up to 7,000 RPMs all the time, right? I'm addicted to this adrenaline by now, and cortisol, and being of value, right?
Yep.
And
now let me ask you a question. In between deployments,
forward on through all of this, I don't need to face anything back here.
Yeah, exactly. Like 100%. You're kind of running from your problem, although everywhere you look, you're there. But are you? So now, how come you just answered why you didn't become a UN employee? I just had a question on my tongue and I forgot what it was, but it will come back to me. Sorry for the interruption.
Not at all.
It will come back.
Yeah. So I was actually on my way to Freetown, and I was transiting through New Delhi, India for a friend's wedding. And at the time, my colleague at the WHO office there from the Philippines, I said, hey, I'm in town, let's go have lunch. She's like, yeah, I'd love to see you, come on over. And so I popped over to there's a huge regional office for the WHO there. And I popped over and we had a bite. She's like, you're going to Freetown? I was like, yeah. She's like, well, I don't think that's the best place for you right now. Just stay here 1 second. She went up and got her boss from upstairs, and he came downstairs, and he's a U.S. CDC employee. And a lot of WHO has CDC employees seconded over. So they're from Atlanta, and they're going on a deployment with WHO for a while. They're just rebadging for a little while, right? And he comes downstairs, he goes, all right, you did that? Okay, he looks at her, and he's like, I need someone to go to East Timor. I'm like, well, I'm on my way to Freetown. I already signed the contract. He's like, yeah, but I need someone to go. I don't know what's going on over there. I need someone I can trust. I need someone to tell me what the hell's going on over there. And it's starting next week. And are you in? I was like, okay. And part of that was because by then at the UN level in Freetown, things had calmed down enough, and I couldn't get over there earlier because of the Philippines. And I'd really wanted to go. Like, that was where the most acute needs were. And not to mention my first memories of life on this planet were in that region in Liberia.
Right.
I was like, okay, that sounds like a real fucking adventure. Let's go, right? Ebola? Hell yeah, I'm in. But by then, they're like, okay, things have calmed down to the point where the government's actually pushing back. And because the World Bank is actually part of the UN, the World Bank was giving these grants and loans, and then they weren't really liking that. And so they're like, you're going to be of limited utility. The real acute need is not in Freetown anymore. It's in East Timor. And I was like, okay, or Timor-Leste. And at the time, it was the newest country on earth. Now that's South Sudan, but at the time, it was the newest country that existed, right?
Okay.
And I knew nothing about it. It's the tip of an island, and it used to be part of Indonesia. So there's an island there in that part of the world, right above Australia. It's cut in half, and it's a former Portuguese colony. So they speak Portuguese there, and Tetun is their local language. And the guy was like,
do you speak any other languages other than
I've picked up a little bit in each place, enough to get by. Like in Haiti,
really?
I would speak some Haitian Creole to do a quick interview, like what's wrong, how do you feel, a medical interview, and just get through town and stuff. And but for the most part, I'm not there long enough to really get into it.
Okay.
Weirdly, in East Timor, I was able to use my Spanish, which I learned in high school. They don't speak Spanish there, but all the doctors in East Timor were trained in Cuba, because as they became a new country, they were communist, and the UN and Australia and the States and all these countries, Western countries, were donating money and aid. Well, Cuba wanted to be part of they wanted to contribute as well, and their communist brethren there, but they had no money. So they said, send us your 700 best students. We'll train them to be doctors in our world-class medical system, and we'll send them back. And so all the doctors in East Timor, they speak Spanish. So I was able to actually communicate with them in Spanish, which is surreal, obviously.
Yeah, that's great. Cuba's got a world-class health system. I didn't realize that.
Top level. Absolutely.
I had no idea.
They do it really well.
That's great, at least for the people.
Yeah. So I ended up, instead of going to Freetown, I ended up in Delhi for a few more days, and got on, the next flight down. And they wanted to send 6 medical doctors down there. So 5 doctors went, and me, and they basically just put my resume in the stack and shipped me over there. And just got to business. We planned for 4 months, and we went to every little village and shack in the entire country. And in 3 weeks at the end, we vaccinated 500,000 kids for polio, measles, and Ebola. And again, this is the newest country in the world, so there's barely any infrastructure, barely any roads. Amazing people, beautiful place, but at the same time, just very, very poor. And so really satisfying, but a lot of time in isolation, living in tents in the middle of nowhere, in isolation, drinking.
Oh, excuse me, that's what I want to ask you. So in between deployments, do you isolate? Are you essentially isolating and then going to deployment and then isolating?
Yeah, I mean, I would go check in with my friends in whichever town is, in Minnesota or wherever for a little bit. But for the most part, I'm either hanging at my parents' farm in Wisconsin, drinking, or I'm going to a ranch in Nevada I used to work on and being a cowboy for a little bit just to rest and reset. But really, it's like it's a great excuse to just, while I'm resting, I'm gonna have a couple of beers, and by a couple of beers I mean 18 Coors Lights, right?
Yeah, just checking out
on an easy day. So yeah, a lot of excuses, a lot of lying to myself, a lot of not facing things, but at the
that's
same
what we
time,
do, bro.
Yeah, 100%, right? So East Timor, 5 months there, amazing, super satisfying, but at the same time, digging that hole a little bit deeper each time, right? Come back to the States, rest, reset again, get another call. This time it's Fiji. Well, that sounds like a pretty good destination. Everyone's like, you get to work in Fiji? Yeah, it's a honeymoon destination. Well, it is for the first week or two, but that beach, that postcard beach, it's $2,000 a night, and it's on a different island. So
exactly.
Really, you're just in another developing country. This time it's 10 hours from any city. It's in the middle of the ocean, right? So they literally rotate people through those places quickly because they go island crazy. Like the isolation is real, right? Fiji just happens to be the biggest one and has an airport big enough to actually run like big flights and things. So it's a tourist destination, but it's also the hub for the UN in that region. And so 9 months there. The first 2 weeks really cool. It's not that it was bad, right? I'll take it over Afghanistan for sure. But the isolation for real, and just drinking, and we're also responding to a storm that hit Fiji as well as the Zika virus outbreak. But a lot of really interesting people met, a lot of good colleagues, like, the brotherhood that you have in your career, right? We have that too in the aid world, right? Especially when you're in the thick of things together, like instant friends, and it's, I can call these people 5 years without talking, and we're back on, right? Immediately.
Yeah, you have that bond.
There's no explanation needed, right?
Yep.
So what a gift! It's amazing, right? And that's
it really is,
right?
Yeah.
At some point, really toward the end there, I was like, okay, this is really starting to get out of hand with the drinking. I'm really not being of service to anyone at this point.
How much you drinking? Like on a daily, what are you drinking?
I mean, I could put down. I could put down a half liter of vodka and a couple of beers.
Okay. Yeah, so you're going hard.
Yeah. On the weekend, during the week, you dial it down to 12 beers on a night.
Hey, you're making the Irish ancestors proud of you, bro.
Lager though, right? It's not
exactly.
And
I'm half Irish, half Italian, so.
Yeah, I'm not fucking around at this point, Mike.
Oh yeah.
And so get back to the U.S. and things are as bad as they've ever been as far as mental health goes. I'm like, I just got to get out to the ranch. I'm going to go ride horses, and end up spending 7 months out there just hiding, right? Drinking and hiding. Eventually, had to get sober. And my dad, he's like, look, we can't do this anymore. And he'd gotten sober himself, and a couple of slip-ups and things. But, without him, I'd be dead for sure. Would have drank myself to death. I didn't have a plan to kill myself, Mike, but I just didn't care if I lived or died anymore.
Yeah.
And frankly, I just thought I was going to die in a helicopter crash overseas. I didn't think I was going to live this long anyway. I had no.
What you were doing, brother, it was probably a good chance that you may have met your demise early.
Yeah, who the hell is going over to Afghanistan with no gun or flak jack in the middle of the war?
Exactly.
What are you trying to do here, buddy? Right?
Holy
what are you trying to prove, right? And even in the Philippines, wild shit. And it wasn't just alcohol over there. I had access to all kinds of stuff. And
yep.
So, at some point, my dad was just like, "Look, we got to go in." And so, getting sober, I'll just taper off, like not happening. I had it bad, right? Fully dependent on alcohol at this point. And so went into detox one time, didn't quite work. Second time, okay, now we got a couple months here, sobriety. I'm good. I can just have one. Nope. 2 weeks later, bender and back to detox, right? So I had to go detox 5 times to get rid of it finally. And at some point, I don't even really know why I had the motivation at the end to just not do it again and not relapse again, other than I just didn't want to put my parents through it again because I could see the toll it was taking on them. And my dad, having survived it and gone sober, he's just watching this and I can't do this to them anymore. They've been such amazing parents and so much love and support, and I just can't do this to them anymore.
Sometimes that's enough, bro.
Yeah, so if anything, it's guilt. There's guilt and shame.
Yeah.
Right? Not self-love, not I want to be better, I want to get, no, it's all right. And so for whatever combination, got sober month after month, day after day, week after week, stayed sober. But the existential problem that comes from losing my entire identity, Mike, was wrapped around being an aid worker. I wore that as armor. I was so proud of that career. It's all I wanted to do. Even in college, I wanted to work for WHO, and I finally did it. I made it. Now you're taking it away from me? Because sobriety and aid work are not, at least for me, compatible, right? There's
Really?
no way I can go back out there. Like the risk.
So
is
no
too-
one was essentially taking it from you in your mind. You're taking it
Yeah,
from
no
yourself.
one said you can't do this anymore, but I
Yeah.
knew I couldn't do it. Like the risk is too high, right? Oh yeah, I'll come over there. No, dude, we know how this is gonna end up. Like no doubt about it, right? So spun my heels for a little while, just kind of hanging out, being pretty bored, just with this existential question of like, okay, what next? When am I gonna get a fucking office job after this?
Yep.
You know, I've been flying around C-130s in the Philippines, fucking doing all kinds of. I got a Glock touching my waistband. I'm driving around Manila doing cocaine with political science. Like it was insane. Now what am I?
Normal life is going to be.
What am I gonna
more
go
like
do?
that.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, work behind a desk. Get the fuck out of here, right?
Yep.
So that's what's going on in my mind anyway. Be like, oh, what are we gonna do? And lo and behold, so I'm in Wisconsin at this point. My parents have this little farm there. They retired to, and down the road is this little group. They're part of Alaska Native Corporation, and the guy who runs it's a 20-year Army guy. Right, he spent a ton of time over at Bagram, and he's got this contract to run the power station there. And it's you know, we're the prime, and the subcontractors are already over there running the power station, but he's a friend of my parents, and we introduced, and he's like, look, I just need someone to go to Afghanistan for 30 days and, you know, and be on site. I'm like, well, I've been there before, you know, Bagram sounds pretty safe. And guess what? Ain't a lot of drinking happening over in Afghanistan, I'm pretty sure. So, of course there is on the base and everything, but
Yeah, exactly.
you know, by that point I had enough sobriety where I was like, I can make this work. And I just wanted to venture. I just wanted to get out, right? Like I need to get back out there. Well, lo and behold, that's booked. You know, I got the flights, got the CAT card to get on the base, got everything lined up. And then COVID. So this is March 2020. Level 4 travel ban for the entire world goes into effect the day before we're supposed to leave. So that trip's not happening, right? Not gonna be able to get back. And so there I am again, just sitting there like, okay, I'm supposed to have this awesome adventure and live in the red again, and now I'm stuck.
Yep.
And a friend of mine from college, she calls, and she's a doctor at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. And she says, hey, you know, COVID's really kicking off here. We're trying to set up some resources for these homeless shelters. And you got 200 people in a room, all in bunk beds. That's prime breeding ground for COVID, right? She's like, you know, this is pretty fucked up. We could use some help up here. You know, are you available? Can you come help? And I was like, well, as it turns out, yeah, I just got a big chunk of free time. Trip I was going to be on got blown up, so here we go. And I went up there 4 days later. I was supposed to help her out for a couple months, and that turned into 3.5 years.
Damn.
And working in the homeless shelters, trying to stabilize that. Basically built a homeless shelter, refurbished one, and got that up and running for COVID positive and symptomatic people in downtown St. Paul, Minnesota. And then the team there, basically, they started a testing program where you could do the drive-through testing, the nasal swab stuff.
Yep.
Like, well, we could use people who can, have logistical experience. I'm like, well, I used to run these massive projects for the WHO. I could probably help you with this. And so they got me on the team, and then a week later, I was the director of it. And just took over and started running stuff, and then testing turned into vaccination once the vaccine became available. And a quick note on that, there's a lot of political stuff about vaccines, especially mRNA vaccines. And I have a molecular biology background. Like my science background really lent itself really well to this. Between college and NIH, I did 6 months in a molecular biology lab, and I also had a stint in the University of Wisconsin-Madison Cancer Institute working on HPV. And that lab helped create the Gardasil vaccine for cervical cancer. And so I knew about molecular virology, and it was like just perfectly tailored for COVID because I knew what mRNA vaccines were. They had actually they started to develop those in 1989. The first time we put lipids and mRNA in human cells was 1989. It wasn't created in 2020 off the shelf. Like a lot of
Yeah, that's the way it appeared.
It's been decades.
No one told us otherwise.
It had been decades in development, right? And DARPA actually gave Moderna $25 million to create that platform specifically for the armed forces. So they created this vaccine platform that was perfectly tailored for that moment. All they needed was the viral sequence. Pop it in there, plug and play, here you go. So yeah, it was quickly, that had been sitting on the shelf waiting for the right moment. And COVID was the right moment.
We should have publicized that more because everyone's like, how the hell they come up with a vaccine this fast?
It all happens on the ambassador. So Robert Redfield was the director of the CDC at the time. This guy was an empty suit, didn't know what he was talking about. His predecessor, Tom Frieden, would have been a much better ambassador for this, but they needed somebody to go on TV and explain what the hell was going on with these things.
Yeah.
And it got lost in the noise with social media. It got real crazy real quickly, right? And politics and public health do not mix. So it was really unfortunate, but it's very challenging, Mike, to basically translate these complex molecular biology concepts to the general public who don't have that background, right? It's not their fault. These are complicated things, right? But that ended up being kind of my job there. After a while, it was like,
Mark, even like just to the layperson, just tell them that this was created 1989, and we were waiting for this, and now we could just introduce the virus.
It started to create 1989. The first time we put lipids and mRNA, which is basically what the COVID vaccines were.
Yep.
The Pfizer and Moderna ones was 1989, and been in development all the way since then, and perfected by Moderna, and then BioNTech in Germany and Pfizer kind of worked with them, but Moderna in Massachusetts, DARPA paid them $25 million to perfect that platform. So all of a sudden it rolls out and it's available. And we're like, oh shit, okay, we gotta build these sites really quickly. So we parlayed what we knew from mass testing into mass vaccination, and I had a really, really good team who was able to execute a lot of this plan in a really short amount of time. And it freed me up to do kind of the more delicate stuff. So my deputy and my team around me was able to run a lot of logistics for this operation, which freed me up to talk to the public, who are often really scared about this stuff. They were misinformed, they didn't know. And so I would literally bring a whiteboard and I would start drawing what mRNA is, what DNA is, how the cell works, and why this works and why this is effective. I would bring papers, I would bring the actual clinical trial data to the clinics, and I would show people, I'm like, no one's making money off this and things, but I could go on all day about that stuff.
Oh, sure.
Because I had the confidence from it, and I knew that we just need those ambassadors in the moment. So anyway, super interesting work. At the end of the day, like, there's a risk there. Like, okay, because I lost my identity, Mike, and my value to society, because I can't go out and do that work anymore. Well, lo and behold, as bad as COVID was, for me, it was a new lease on life, because it gave me a purpose again. And it was like, okay, this is something I can do. I do have competency here. I can be of value. And so that's why I went with it so hard, right? And just sunk my teeth into it and went running, because that's what I was still holding on to. Like, okay, if I can just do this, I can be effective in this. I can have that self-esteem back, right?
Yeah.
The guilt and the shame.
Well, it answers that question. Who am I?
The guilt and the shame of the addiction is so bad. It's so limiting, right? How fucking useless are you, It's like, oh, I can be of value. So that's why I took to it so well. I really put my heart and soul into it. Was able to stay sober, not fully, I was using marijuana to go to sleep at night and things. And I'm like, I'd rather smoke weed than drink again. So kind of gave
Well, can I interject for 1 second? We're talking just now, you mentioned that, you were a failure or whatever, you couldn't stay sober. But it's funny, I used to look at addiction as weakness, and it's totally reframed in my mind now. These are substances that allow people to navigate life. If they did not have them, there would be so many more suicides that occurred. I'm not advocating their usage. I mean, I had an opioid addiction myself, but it allows us to get through life on a daily basis. And if we did not have those things, it's exactly what it is. And it's not that weakness. Pretty much everyone, to a man or woman who's got an addiction, I'm not talking about socially, experimenting. An addiction is they're hiding pain, they're masking pain or some other trauma that they don't want to face. It's not that they want to be addicted to meth or coke or opioids or whatever the case may be and ruin their lives. When I was doing that shit, I knew it was a house of cards. Eventually it was going to fall. I didn't want to be doing that, but it was my coping mechanism.
Right. And like I've had many insights about the drinking come up, and like there's just so much social stigma about it. Like, oh, it's a failure of willpower. And like, this is actually only within the last 6 months, I heard a little clip of somebody describing it as actually rethinking addiction as just an avoidance technique. They're just avoiding. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay. Of course, there's a biological genetic component to it, right? There's a predisposition. There's a physical dependency that arises once you start using these things. So that addiction is self-sustaining once it gets there. But at the end, at the heart of it, right, are some people alcoholics and some people aren't. Yeah. Trying to hide, trying to numb, trying to avoid those emotions, right? And heal that trauma. Or, numb that trauma, I should say, not heal it. So true. And the amount of grace that I've given myself afterwards, year by year, is amazing. And paradoxically now, sometimes folks will come up to me and be like, hey man, pretty amazed that you're able to stay sober. Because they knew me when I was just a fucking raging party animal, right? That's my thing. Like, wow, we're really, pretty impressed that you're able to do this. I think I might have a problem too, actually. And how'd you do it? And then you get to be that beacon for that guy, right? For that buddy. It's amazing, right? Wow, that's an unexpected benefit of getting sober. But the shame,
really
the
is.
first year was like I was hiding from everything, right? Did not want to make friends, did not want to see my old friends. And then slowly I came out, and now I fucking own it, right? Like, hell yeah, I was
Yeah.
back.
Like, forgive yourself. I forgave myself.
100%.
Yeah.
It's like
Mark, it's funny. I just did
didn't
a
intend to do
podcast
that.
episode. What's it?
I didn't intend to be an alcoholic. No one
Yeah,
wants
exactly.
to be an addict.
I just had a podcast
Just
episode.
doing the best
drop,
with what I could, you know.
Yeah. It's called Rise Above with Kevin Lanning. And all it is basically, it's a podcast that he does. He had an addiction problem, and he talks to former addicts. So I went on there and talked about my career and then opioid addiction. And I guess it just dropped. So he sent me some collaboration stuff, and I looked. And I never read comments. Typically, I'll go in there for 1 second, just read a few, and that's the last I read. But, of course, you know, it goes to a lot of them where, you know, cop doing this, da-da-da-da-da. Obviously, we're held to a higher standard, but we're still human beings. And I'm to the point now where I don't want to say I don't care what anyone says, but it is more important to me to talk about what I went through to possibly help someone else. I'm no longer embarrassed about it. I made peace. I did what I did. It's not me. It's something I did, and it's in the rearview mirror. So I don't have to worry about it again. But it takes balls coming on here and talking about, you know, the issues you've had with alcohol and your biggest misstep. So, you know, I want to pat you on the back for that. Or you should pat yourself on the back for that. But I want to give you kudos. You know, people watch these things, and it's a piece of cake when you're watching from your house. But for you to be the person on a podcast talking about this so that anyone in the world could see this takes guts, man. So, you know, definitely give yourself a pat on the back every now and then, in addition to all the other stuff you're doing.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's one of my, looking back on it, one of my biggest accomplishments. Because for a long time there, Mike, there's no way I would see myself in this situation right now. I've never been more sober. The only substance that I use at all is caffeine, and I don't even like that. I actually drink decaf coffee.
Really?
There's no recreational substances whatsoever. Nicotine, cannabis, certainly no psychedelics, nothing.
Good for you.
I could not be more sober, which is such a 180 from where I was 8 years ago, where there was always something on board. I mean, even up until a couple years ago, there was always something on board. Nicotine, caffeine, cannabis, whatever it was. And Ibogaine is really what put a nail in that coffin, right? And we'll get to that in a second, but the neurological reset of multiple rounds of Ibogaine, like, it's just not the addiction there, you know, with those substances is just gone.
Yeah.
But I got sober from alcohol the hard way, right? Nitty gritty, fucking white knuckling that thing. Went to a couple of AA meetings, you know, the counseling, but gave that all lip service. The only thing that I really got from the AA stuff, which is a great program, there was parts of it that just didn't resonate with me, but the camaraderie was the big thing, right? Nobody gets sober and stays sober on their own. There's no way I could have done it on my own, Mike, with willpower. Like, I would not. There's no chance that I was going to wake up one day and be like, oh, I got to stop. I'm going to go do this. There were months where every day I woke up and said, okay, today we got to do something about this. We got to stop. You know, we can't do this anymore, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
By about noon, just by magic, I had locomoted myself to the liquor store, or I had locomoted myself to the garage where I had that stash. And it's like, one more day. Okay, we'll do it tomorrow then, right?
Yeah.
Just lying to yourself. The line.
Yeah, just bargaining, man.
Bargaining. Yep. Just fucking bullshit. And at some point, you just get so fed up with it. Like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
But it is so fucking hard. And, you know, there's medication-assisted therapy now, things like naltrexone and stuff, which is good. I tried those, drank right through them.
Wow.
And, you know, you really need a support system around you, right, to get sober and to stay accountable, right? And if you have access to a tool like Ibogaine, boy, does it make it easier. But back then, here's the other thing too. Like, I would have got sober way quicker if I knew about Ibogaine back then. But back then, my brain was so mush that I wouldn't have been able to receive that. I would have been able to go do the journey, and, you know, I don't think I could have got sober for a week beforehand enough to actually clear that. I would have had to come to a place like Ambio to actually detox and then go through the journey. But I would not have got as much benefit, like with the mental health part of it and the spiritual part of it, because I was so far gone at that point. And,
right.
So I wasn't ready to receive the medicine at that point. And so I have a lot of folks who show up at the clinic like, man, I knew about this 4 years ago. I wish I would have shown up then. It's like, dude, you weren't ready then. You come here at the exact right time, right? So I do counsel people, if you can get sober the traditional way, whether that's a 30-day rehab or detox and AA or whatever, no matter if it's alcohol or any other substance, that's amazing, right? If it's all you can do just to get a week's sobriety under your belt to show up clean and piss clean before you take Ibogaine, so be it, right? This is going to be the catalyst that's going to help you. You might need round 2 later on, and that's okay. Most folks with substance abuse issues do. You know, and I say most, it's about 2/3. But 7 years ago, I wouldn't have been ready for this. I didn't even know about Ibogaine back then, and in a way, I needed to suffer to learn from it.
Yeah.
Right. There's no shortcut. Right.
Nope.
So it was all perfect as it needed to be. Put my parents and my brothers, and I'd say the pain that I caused my parents, but at the same time, my twin brother watched me go through this, and like just terrible, right? And my little brother as well, like. That was one of the biggest pains, was the guilt from putting my loved ones through watching me, because I can't imagine what that was like, right? To see me.
They feel helpless. There's nothing they can do.
Exactly. Terrible. So, but yeah, it had to be that way, and had got to go through it. And in a weird way, I'm grateful for that suffering, because now I know what I'm capable of, right? If I can get through that, okay.
Exactly.
So yeah, just all part of the journey. And like, I talked about this. It sounds almost cliche, but there is no beginning and no end to it. Like the journey has just been going on. And this whole time, and you've just been learning, right? Just been learning about life, learning about yourself the whole time, and
you do to the day you die.
Sorry,
you do to the day you die. It's not like one day you wake up and you're like, man, I figured it out. I figured myself out. I figured life out. The whole thing's a journey. Destinations when you're in that box.
100%, and we're just healing, the entire time. And I've heard some people tell me they're healed, and it's like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You don't. You may think you are right now because you're on cloud 9, just having come off. The medicine, but you're not healed. You're healing. It's a process.
Exactly.
And it never fucking ends.
Yeah.
So yeah, those out there watching, who are just feeling hopeless and like, there's no way I can get off this alcohol or get off this substance, whatever. It is possible. I was that guy. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do without it. Like, I can't imagine life without this substance. It is everything to me, right? If I'm not drinking, I'm thinking about drinking, right? At the end, right? So it's unimaginable. It's unfathomable to be with sobriety. That doesn't even mean anything to me, right? That sounds horrible. That sounds fucking horrific.
Well, you spend so much time thinking about how you're going to get it, when you're going to get it. You can't be without it. So it just takes over your life. Same thing with the pills, man. I had 2 different doctors. I'm ordering online. It's crazy. One day I missed a FedEx shipment. So that night, man, I'm DTing, which is the worst feeling I ever experienced in my life. Yeah. I can see how people who can't get opioid painkillers go to the street to get whatever else. That was my one non-negotiable. Like, it will never happen. Tramadol was my medicine of choice. It was legal back then to order on the internet. So I was like, whenever it comes to the point, if they, make this illegal or put it on a controlled substances and I can't get it online, then that's when I'll go to rehab. There's no way I'm ever going to this. That was my one thing. I would never go to the street. And I knew it. And then, lo and behold.
Well, as a cop, you know what's on the street.
Exactly.
Mixing it in. They're squashing that, they're stepping all over it, this is what I saw in the homeless community in St. Paul. I had all the empathy in the world for these folks. Other people, homeless people, I was like, dude, only by the grace of God is that not me. Like, if my dad hadn't intervened and my mom and dad hadn't intervened, like, I would easily be in that homeless shelter. Just doing whatever for the next thing. And so, the empathy and the sympathy that comes from that, and your ability to communicate or to connect with other human beings who are going through it like that, it's amazing.
It really is.
So, that addiction, getting, year by year, just chipping away at it, becoming very comfortable talking about it and having zero shame about it, and showing up at the bar with my friends, even here in San Diego, and like people I don't know who don't know me. And I always thought I was going to lose all my friends because they're all my drinking buddies. Like, no, in fact, our friendships have gotten better. And I go hang out just the same, go to the bar, I get an NA beer. I actually don't even like NA beer. I just get a club soda with lime. But every once in a while, I will have an NA beer or whatever. And the guys who don't know me, they'll just watch the bartender pouring this NA 0.0 Guinness out. Like, who's this?
Yeah.
And it's just so funny. They kind of watch their face and like, I don't give a fuck anymore, right? I just don't care. Which is amazing because that's what I really cared about, is how people perceive me, right? And like that validation and all that stuff. And like, now I don't have the accolades anymore of being that aid worker. Like, wow, that's so cool. You went out and did that thing. And it's like, that's gone now. And now without that, what are you left with? Well, what you need to get to is unconditional self-love, which is the anti-addiction, right? When you get to a place where you don't want to hurt yourself anymore. And I think that's probably a pretty good segue into the medicine here. After COVID ended, I knew that the isolation wasn't it. I wanted to be near friends, especially good friends from college who had the same kind of worldview. And a lot of them had done some chain migration to San Diego. And just year by year, they kept kind of relocating in the same neighborhood, Ocean Beach here in San Diego. And so after the pandemic ended, I was like, okay, I'm not going to stay in Minnesota. I had no plans to go back there anyway. But being by the ocean in San Diego, you know, a lot of the places I worked overseas were island countries. So I was like, okay, be by the ocean, 30 minutes from Mexico. Like, it's expensive as hell, but San Diego, it's got everything that I need. But most importantly, is being near these friends that I hadn't seen for a long time. And I knew that isolation was a recipe for relapse, right? So picked Ocean Beach because it was gonna be near them. And yeah, I got down here for a couple months. My doctor buddy, he's an ER physician. He also runs a ketamine clinic. Introduced me to mushrooms for the first time. And about the next week, I went off my bupropion, my Wellbutrin. It wasn't ceremonial, it was recreational. I can't say I even tripped or any visuals or anything. And it was social, and it was more just like anxiety inducing anything else. But I was like, okay, I feel good after this. And then I did a ketamine journey with him at his clinic, and I was like, okay, this is a psychedelic. This is what altered perception, altered consciousness feels like. And ketamine is, of course, not a classical psychedelic. It's actually a dissociative. It's an NMDA receptor antagonist. It does not work on serotonin receptors. But it was still cool. It was a break from reality, and I was like, okay, there's something to this. And then we hit his NN-DMT pen as well, in a non-ceremonial way. And now I never use psychedelics without ceremony, but too much respect for them. But it served its purpose, because like, wow, okay, that's what hallucinating is like. Because I hadn't hallucinated by then, and I was just like, you know, you have this perception of what psychedelics are, right? Yeah. And that was the first time I was like, oh my God! And I just had this huge smile on my face, because I was like, wow, this is possible. This is a thing. Are you kidding me? And 2 weeks later, he said, hey, you know, I know this guy in Mexico who runs a clinic down there, and he could use some help with people who are experienced, you know, working overseas, and you want me to introduce you? I was like, yeah, that sounds amazing. And that person was Martin Polanco, the founder of the Mission Within, and he's really the progenitor. He's the OG, if you will, of a lot of the work that's happening with Ibogaine, 5-MeO, and veterans. And so I had a call with him, and you know, next month came down to Shadow, and didn't really know what it was about. I knew plant medicine or earth medicine was kind of what I was looking for. I knew it had potential, but I didn't understand how powerful it was until I came to the Mission Within, and just witnessed a retreat. And it's almost like people healing in real time. And I was blown away. I was like, this is it. This is a thing? Are you kidding me?
It's beautiful to see.
And I just, you know, I quit my job in public health, and I was like, this is it. And again, I had not done Ibogaine or 5-MeO at this point. But I knew this is it. Yep. And so I just said, you know, whatever you guys need, you know, I'll come back down, and, you know, 2 more retreats, and just incredible. And then I was supposed to work the 4th retreat, and somebody dropped out the week of. And so I kind of knew this might be an opportunity that was going to pop up, but very challenging to work in an Ibogaine clinic if you haven't done the medicine, right? And so, yeah, I got a call on, it was Monday night, it might have been Tuesday, actually. And my colleague, he said, you know, there's a spot open this weekend, you know, how would you feel about participating instead of working? I was like, let's go, you know, and, you know, terrified, of course, because I had seen, you know, these guys come downstairs and be like, yeah, it was rough, you know, puking all night and everything. And I was like, oh man. And of course, in my mind, I thought I knew what it was, right? Like we all do, right? We have this preconceptions, trauma work. I went to go revisit all this stuff. And, you know, I have this idea that it's going to be my work in mass graves and all this stuff, but it's, you know, I knew there's some childhood stuff, and I was like, I don't think I have any suppressed things, and you know, but who knows? Or I really don't know. You're going to the unknown, right? So, even though I work there and I know I'm going to be safe, and like medically, originally why I was interested in Ibogaine was because as a recovering addict, I was like, what is it doing in the brain that's resetting these addictions overnight? This sounds way too good to be true. So I was interested in the receptors and the data and all this, and you know, the space holding and the spiritual and the, for lack of a better term, the woo-woo part of it, didn't compute for me, right? I'm a science nerd, right? Yeah. I used to work at the UN. I used to work at the NIH. I'm a government scientist, for God's sakes. I have half a dozen published papers in journals. I don't know anything about energy work. But boy, did I after the experience. And, you know, I, you know, went into it as open-minded as I could, but still worried, still scared. And when it kicked in, you know, I was just like, at this moment of panic, where it's like, oh, I made a huge mistake. What am I doing here in this bed? This is terrible. And in the same second, I was like, no, you're supposed to be here. And I just relaxed into it, breathed into it, like my ops lead, Cam, had told me, and retreat host facilitator. Yep. And then what followed was, you know, the most profound experience in my life, right? Where you're just reconnecting with, I didn't need to go revisit any of the trauma, and nothing from childhood that came up, right? I didn't really get the life review that a lot of people talk about. And I think there's a huge misconception out there that a lot of people expect that that's what you get with Ibogaine.
Yeah, huge misconception.
And the podcasts and stuff. And that's what they glom onto. It's not less than half of people get the life review. Only about 70% of people even get visuals, right? There's 30% of people who get more auditory or somatic or introspective, where they're a little bit underwhelmed by the lights and sirens part of it, right? The hallucinations. Ibogaine is much more than just a visual journey, much more.
Yeah, it is.
Right. And so,
what'd you get on yours?
You can only learn that one way, Mike, and that's by doing
exactly.
It. So, I went in
like?
long night, very long night. I don't typically like to talk at all about the subjective experience of mine because, guys want to. They always ask about it, and I'm like, it's useless. It doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
Yours is going to be different, right? And I don't want to create this preconception or this expectation of what it's going to be, but I don't mind talking about a couple of things with it. I was fortunate to get, of course, it was physically very taxing, throwing up all night and trying to get to the bathroom. And of course, since I worked there in my arrogance, I was like, oh, it hasn't kicked in yet. I'm just going to unplug myself from the EKG machine and go to the bathroom. And I hit the deck, as soon as I took a couple steps, I was like, wow, this ataxia is bad. And just like they said, don't go to the bathroom on your own. And it's like, okay, I learned that lesson. And Myra came over and picked me up, and she's like, she's my colleague. I know her at this point. She's like, so, that was an adventure. And I just went back into the journey, and I was terrified it was going to go away if I took off the headphones. Mission Within, we use headphones. Other places like Ambio, they don't use that. It's just a tool to keep you in the experience, right? Yeah. So I kept the eye mask on and the headphones on the whole time because I was terrified that this amazing thing that was happening was going to go away if I distracted myself by going like this. I know now that you can take them off. It's going to come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just unbelievable. And some key takeaways from the experience, what I was lacking I was 39 when I went through, for basically 4 decades of my life, was a significant spiritual experience where I connected with something greater than myself. And I'd always loop spirituality in with religion. And as a scientist and, coming from an Irish Catholic family, I just didn't understand what we're doing here with the Catholic Church in particular. Like, what, are you joking me? Like, look at the headlines. Like, what are we doing? This is insane. And so I just threw all that out. I just had no use for religion, but unfortunately spirituality too, right? And I just looped those two together. And now I know there's a clear distinction between spirituality and religion, right? And basically, this connection to something greater, the nature of the universe. That's the word that God. There's a lot of people, that's their word. Great mystery, source, spirit, whatever. Mine was universe.
Mine's universe as well.
This universe of, just like this massive unfolding entropic reaction that just is. And despite your little thoughts and your little ego trying to control everything, you really don't control anything at all. So why are you worrying so much, And I had this idea that there was like 3 marks. So one was my corporal body mark, the mark that that you do identify as that's Mark. 2 is my soul. There's a soul version of me that's in here, that's hosted here. And then the ego mind mark is just running roughshod for decades over the other ones. And I literally apologized to my body mark, like, dude, sorry I put you through all that. Like, thanks for still being alive. Like, sorry liver, sorry brain. Like, the damage I did with the drinking and, like, insane. So that was nice to learn. And, the soul mark of being of light and love, just waiting in the background underneath it for the ego mark to get done with all its bullshit and get out of the way. The true nature of the universe is not quarks and atoms and muons and Higgs bosons, and the true matter of the universe is little marshmallow letters that spell out LOVE, right? And of course, talking about this even now, it sounds insane, right? Probably not to you since you've been in the medicine, but it's like, okay, so at the end of the day, the matter of the universe is love, right?
Yeah,
and that's all that matters.
People that know me, when I talk about that, they have to be like, what the hell is this guy talking about?
And this is one of the reasons I don't
talk about talking about love.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons I don't talk about it, because it doesn't really make sense until you do the medicine. But and then just visions of kind of like this, just Indra's web is the Hindu interpretation of this, but there's just infinite expanse of things. And why are you so worried about other people's expectations? Like, they're made of universe as well. Everything is universe. Universe, like diamonds can't break diamonds, right? Universe can't break universe. Like, they can't hurt you. Yep. Like, why are you so worried about this? Just download after download, and at the end, started to kind of come out of it at 11 a.m. the next day, and started to fade out. And the female therapist came over, and she could see I was starting to stir and starting to come out of it. And she came over at the edge of the bed and just sat down, and she just looked at me and she said, and I kind of went like this, and I just kind of looked at her, took the eye mask off. She's like, Mark, you don't need to carry those burdens anymore. And I just started bawling, and for 45 minutes, and just emotions that I had kept down for so long, right? Because I can't cry. I can't show emotion. Certainly can't show weakness.
Oh,
No, I'm a
yeah.
man.
Vulnerability? Come on, man.
Yeah, get the hell out of here. No, we're here to perform. We're here to execute tasks, right? And we're here to take care of other people, not ourselves. We're the helpers. We don't need help. And just all these lies that we tell ourselves. And, as an excuse, right? And so I just, started crying, laughing, realizing they're the same thing, that they're the same. Like, there's no need to avoid the crying or the laughing. They're equal. They're just emotions.
Yeah.
It's not a defect.
Emotions on that wheel. Exactly.
It's just normal human emotions. Like, this is healthy. And it felt so good. I could feel waves of black shit that I had just like stacked right here on my heart in this column, just coming off in waves, right? Wave after wave. And I felt so light afterwards. This light sense, just clarity, like unbelievable. And it felt like just this backpack that I had been carrying around for decades was just off, right? And I literally gained an inch in height after the experience.
Really?
Because my posture changed. I could actually touch the ground, my flexibility, like all this tension. I've been holding my fascia and things.
Wow.
It was wild. And they don't tell you that in the prep talk.
No.
And so, just in awe, of just the experience. And I finally kind of got out of bed at 2 p.m. and spent the next, the rest of the night and the rest of the afternoon just kind of with this shitting grin on my face, being like, is this wow? And, my colleague Eva was down there, and I just came and gave her a big hug, and I didn't have to say anything. She knew. She was just like, yes. And it was just amazing, and I couldn't even write anything down in my journal. Like, how am I going to put this into words? Like, there are no words that
it is ineffable.
Words are insufficient. Words in any language are insufficient, right? Just unbelievable. And, moving through that, like, into the next day, since I worked there, I volunteered to go first on 5-MeO. And just mind-boggling experience. I did not, kind of like with Ibogaine, some folks are expecting this heaven experience with 5-MeO. We serve Bufo, so some places will use one big synthetic dose of 5-MeO. We use real Bufo.
Yeah, that's what I got in MeO.
Yep. And so, we step people into it, and on that third one, typically, some folks are one and done. Some folks need that second one. I end up with the third one in. They get bigger as you move forward, but the goal is to not like have you totally dissociate and black out and not remember it. But I moved through this experience in full somatic release. Probably pretty jarring to somebody who's never seen that before. But of course, my colleagues are holding perfect space for me, and I had the sensation of just this non-dual state of consciousness, and that non-dual state would be. There's no more distinction between the observer and the observed, or me and you, or me and that. It's all one. And it's impossible to conceive of this until you go through it. It's just, again, ineffable. But that's the best approximation in English that I can put to it. Again, went upstairs, didn't have the out-of-body perception, didn't go to heaven, didn't go to, didn't meet God or anything like that, but still I knew this big release had happened. And again, unable to write anything down in my journal. And I was just like, what am I going to do with this pen? This is right. And just
exactly.
And just amazing. Got a lot more confidence working retreats after that one, Mike. It's like the idea that I'm going to work an Ibogaine retreat before actually doing the medicine was laughable, but now I knew. And just recommitted. Not that I needed to recommit, but it was just full send on working retreats and doing as much as I possibly could in service of the medicine, of others. And I was just like this urgency to help others. And I had, this is probably pretty common with a lot of people, and there's obviously a big confirmation bias here. But there's a point in the medicine where I was like, in the Ibogaine journey, where I was like, all right, this seems too good to be true. Like, I'm just getting all these amazing connections and like learning about myself and everything and my place in the universe. Like, pretty sure this is supposed to be bad. Like, medicine, let's go. And you can interact with the medicine, right?
Yeah.
You can ask questions, right? And it doesn't make sense until you do it. But I actually asked for it. I was like, okay, let's go to the Philippines and go to the mass grave. Like, what I thought was holding me back, right? I was like, okay, you want to go? Fine. Here's 30 seconds of that. But really what we need to show you this, right? We need to show you the nature of things and your place in it. And so, it knew. And there's a part of it there where I was like, okay, I'm at this inflection point where I've been doing all this crazy stuff in public health and going. And this is, again, not that long after COVID had finally ended. And just at the early stages of Mission Within. And I asked the medicine, I was like, okay, so what's the next step? Like, what should I do next career-wise? And without hesitation, I would say the medicine answered back, but really I answered back. Ease their suffering is 3 words, right? Ease their suffering.
You certainly got the same message I got, brother.
It was a pretty sweet validation of what I'd already been trying to do my entire career.
Yeah.
It was also validation of whether that was in research, biomedical research for Parkinson's, or as an EMT, or as an aid worker, or as somebody who's working in public health trying to vaccinate people and keep homeless folks from getting COVID and things like that. Just at the end of the day, trying to ease suffering. And I think my obsession with that came from trying to provide safety and health for others, because I didn't feel that for whatever reason, right? And
okay.
More on that later. That kind of came from a different psychedelic journey. But at some point, just getting this idea that, ease their suffering. And so it was just confirmation that I was in the right place, and, kept going. Worked a lot of retreats. Parlayed that into just going over for a little shadow visit at Ambio down the road, and talking with Trevor. I'm like, hey, I hear a lot about Ambio, just curious to come check it out. I don't need any pay or anything, but I'd like to know. And so had me over there, worked a retreat. The guy who was there didn't have a whole lot of experience as a host, and so I helped him with the prep talks and things, which I had at this point been very experienced with at Mission Within, and really liked it a lot. Trevor had me back a couple other times to work with first responders and things like that, and then at the neuro clinic as well, their neuro program working with Parkinson's and MS, which again was really nice to come full circle 20 years after working on Parkinson's at the National Institutes of Health. Here I am in Mexico, working at a clinic for Parkinson's, watching watching symptoms in real people get reduced. Unbelievable. And then they invited me to sit with them at their staff retreat, so I went through MBO in October 2025 with I was one of 5 of their staff. And of course, I didn't feel the need for the medicine again. I was obviously very curious, both professionally and personally. But if I had been taking a spot in a normal retreat from someone else, I wouldn't have done it. But because they had open spots and it was a staff-only retreat, they had the capacity. I was like, I'd love to. Just as profound. This time I got introduced to the intelligence or the technology of the medicine that some people talk about. Just absolutely profound. And I had no anxiety going into Ibogaine. I was like, Ibogaine's my...
Can you describe what that is, Mark? The intelligence in medicine?
It's it's so hard to describe, but it was basically this idea that it showed me that, look, like, we're here, we're omnipresent, we're in all universes all the time, in the multiverse at all times, seeding these realms with this intelligence, with with this love, with this Ibogaine spirit. And it was also, again, hard to conceptualize, but it basically was like all people have this framework inside them, this structure of superstructure of this intelligence, and only a few have been woken up by the powder, who've been blessed with the Ibogaine powder or Iboga powder. And what a gift. What a gift.
Kind of like awareness and higher consciousness.
Yeah, for sure. And I also had the sensation of it just scrubbing in my brain and a bunch of other stuff. I mean, I got probably 10 million images, right? Definitely overwhelming, but very challenging. Weirdly, I had a lot of confidence going into Ibogaine. Not weirdly, I guess, having worked with it so much, but I was like, I'm in. And they had to get me a pillow. I was laughing so much, which is not what people think about for Ibogaine. Like, usually people are like, man, it's going to be hell. It's like, no, I couldn't stop laughing. My purge was just pure laughter. One, I was thinking about, what, you had to do this again, douchebag? You forgot? You forgot about the supernova nuclear bomb of psychedelics? You had to do this again? You need a reminder of this? Are you joking me? I mean, just laughing at myself, right? You idiot. Yeah. And throwing up and then going right back in. And the other thing I was thinking about was like the idea that at some point, because this grows naturally in the jungle, there could be a silverback gorilla on Ibogaine who ate the wrong root, and I was just tripping balls walking around the jungle. Just how does an animal deal with this, right? So I was just laughing, and it was amazing. At the same time, I had a lot of trepidation, just pure respect for 5-MeO, and almost didn't do it, but went through because my ego was trying to control it. And I told Trevor, I was like, I think I just want to do Ibogaine and feel the full power of that without an adulterant. And then at the moment, I was like, no, it's your ego trying to control the situation. Who are you? Just go through the protocol. And vastly different 5-MeO experience than the first time with Bufo. Don't need to get too much into that, but I know now a lot more about that medicine, how it works, and how powerful it really is. Just
you see God
amazing.
In your journey?
Amazing. Sorry?
Did you see God in your journey?
No.
Okay.
No, more of a dissociative, can't really remember any of it. Super long. But very educational, very knowledgeable. I would do it again. Big somatic release as well.
Yeah, it's a beautiful medicine.
Took a long time to make sense of it. Still integrating, right? Still integrating both journeys, to be clear. I mean, it's 2.5 years in, right?
Yep.
It's still integrating. That's not a process that ends right away. And that's something.
I'm 5 months out and I'm very much integrating.
Yeah, 100%. And it never ends. And, so both those experiences, I've tacked on a little bit more experience with San Pedro, with mescaline and ceremony. Really interesting. Had a big experience with that 6 weeks ago. But my goal is now I have so much respect for these medicines that I just don't do anything recreational anymore. So a couple times a year, I did one in January, and then one just last month. And I'm just trying to do it a couple times a year to maintain my level of healing or move forward a little bit and prevent any backsliding, right? But a lot of the work, and here's the key thing that I've come to realize from my own personal experience, but also from working week in, week out at the Mission Within, I brought close to 500 people through the retreat at this point, right? 7 people at a time, 3 to 5 times a month, just boom, boom, boom.
Yep.
There's no shortcut. The work happens afterwards. The medicine's the tool, it's the catalyst, but you have to do the work. The medicine will not heal you.
Exactly.
You will heal yourself. And the medicine's a tool for that, right? It's a tool we didn't have before, right? But anyone thinking that they're going to show up, take the magic African root medicine, and smoke the magic toad medicine, and they're going to be good to go after that is sorely mistaken. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of discipline. But integration is the process, at the end of the day, of enjoyable growth. It's not arduous. It's not going to the gym at 4:30 in the morning every day. There's moments to heal and integrate that experience in traffic, at the grocery store, all the time, right? Integration is the process of enjoyable growth. And it's unique to each person. There's no right way to do it. The only thing you can't do is not do it and not put the effort in. And people will try it. They'll come down, I'm good to go. We got that honeymoon period after Ibogaine.
Oh, yeah.
Get 5 MEO thinking I'm ready to rock.
Got that glow.
I lived it, right? I wouldn't be sitting here spouting this off if I didn't know. I'm good. It's coast. You're good to go. It's like, no, you have to have a plan. You have to have discipline. You have to be accountable to yourself, to the medicine, to the group. You got to stay connected. You got to have a coach. Like there's a lot, right? There's a lot. And you will slip up. You will fuck up. 100%.
Yeah.
You will screw up. Right?
Yeah. You're human.
That's key. You've got to learn. And I get guys who call me all the time. 4 months later, hey, Mark, I relapsed. I fell off the wagon. Oh, yeah? Tell me about it. You feeling pretty shitty about yourself right now, I bet? He's like, yeah, man, I can't believe I did it, but I fell off. I need to come back. Okay. Did you really fall off? Because the old version of you would not be talking to me. You would be at the bar. You'd be at the bottom of the bottle, right? Instead, you're calling me. So that tells me something changed. Tell me about it. Did you have fun? Did you burn it down? Did you close the bar down? No, I had a couple of drinks. It sucked. It wasn't what it used to be. All right, you were looking for the old crutch because you're feeling some stuff. It was uncomfortable. That's okay. And you went and did what you used to do, right? That's your old habit, of course. But it ain't it anymore, right? It doesn't work like it used to because your brain's different. You know better now. You don't want to hurt yourself anymore. And so, let's learn from that. You didn't fall off the wagon. You didn't fail. You didn't fuck up. You just learned something. That's all you're doing, learning something, right? And
Another life lesson.
Right? And maybe that requires another Ibogaine journey. Maybe it requires another 5 MEO journey. Maybe some mushrooms do the trick. Maybe an ayahuasca journey. Well, there's no shame in that. But just don't make that the new crutch.
Yep.
Oh, now every time I feel bad, I just go do toad, or I just go do ayahuasca, or I just go hit some mushrooms.
Yeah. Chase some medicine.
Now you just switch something else out, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit here and tell people that, there's the right amount of medicine to do, each their own, right? Who am I? But I can tell you from observation, I've seen a lot of people working with a lot of guys who have similar issues as me. It ain't about doing more medicine. It's about doing the work without it, right? Yeah. And that's where the integration techniques come in. That's where Wisdom Dojo meditation comes in. And if you're not a veteran, Wisdom Dojo is not on the table for you. But their sister program, Vajra Ocean, is. And that's for women and for civilians.
How do you spell that?
Vajra Ocean. Vajra Ocean. Same content, same stuff, but for civilians and women.
Is Wisdom Dojo for first responders or just vets?
Just veterans right now.
Okay.
Just male veterans right now. But I think they're expanding. Anyway, close partner, Mission Within. A lot of MBO guys are going to that as well. Really useful to keep that going, right? Because a lot of folks, myself included, breath work and meditation, what are you talking about, right?
Yeah.
Before medicine, not possible. Not on the table. 5 minutes sitting with your own thoughts, not happening. No way. Afterwards, bang out an hour session, no problem. I can sit through 2 hours of yoga now easily. And it's like, what is happening now? Your ability to be present with yourself changes, right? But like anything, you gotta work on it. It's a skill, right? It doesn't have to be daily, but it should probably be at least weekly. right?
Yeah.
You're gonna
And
fuck
it's
up.
not easy to ship yourself.
You're gonna fuck up for sure.
Yeah.
You're gonna mess it up. But the key thing is, are you're gonna get going again, right? You're gonna pick it up and move forward. And that's the folks. Everyone gets success off this. The medicine's gonna work. Everyone's always worried. Oh, I hope it works. It's gonna work. Are you gonna work on yourself afterwards? Right? The medicine will do its thing. Even if you don't have the big journey and the psychedelic experience and life review and meet God in 5 and all that, it's doing its thing behind the scenes. I can barely remember the big visuals that I got 2 years ago, right? They're still in there, but it ain't about that, right? That's not the big takeaway, right?
Yeah.
And even folks who don't get the visuals, they get these massive changes afterwards because they're much more in touch with themselves. They're much more present. They're much more introspective. They're way more capable of in the moment, Mike, identifying what's going on here. Their awareness has switched, right?
Yeah.
I'm on this thought right now. I'm feeling anxious. Why is that? I don't feel safe. Okay, let's reset here. Let's take a couple breaths. Let's go into our body. Where do I feel this? This doesn't happen overnight. This takes years of practice afterwards, right? But the key thing is you have all these resources. And one of the first things that was told me by one of the integration coaches, a therapist down at Mission Within, was she's like, this work was never meant to do this work alone. This is why we do it in a group cohort, right? That's why we stay connected with each other afterwards, because you can't get all the benefits on your own. We're social animals, right? And the way this was traditionally used in Bwiti in Gabon, right, in the village, in the tribe, right? You've grown up with these people your entire life. That connection is built in. We don't have that in our society, right? We're all lone wolfing it because we don't want to show vulnerability. I'd rather be alone than show anyone else my vulnerability, right? I'll go hide literally in a garage and drink myself to death, rather than show anyone that I'm weak.
Fuck, people will kill themselves rather than show vulnerability. Exactly. That is incredible to me. Put a bullet in your head rather than raise your hand and ask for help or say you're hurting. It's
mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. And where does that come from?
So sad.
Right? It's amazing.
Yeah. That's why we need to keep having conversations like this to show men and women who are going through it. There's nothing wrong with you. This is your body's normal reaction to the abnormal stuff you've seen and dealt with for years, 100%. Or your civilians, trauma you've experienced. And don't try to minimize your trauma. Just because yours isn't what mine is does not make yours any less.
There's no gatekeeping, right?
Yep.
You don't need to be a veteran to go to. Everyone's like, oh, Ibogaine's Navy SEAL medicine. No, it's human medicine. Everyone should have access to Ibogaine, right? But it is so powerful that we don't want full access here, because it's it is the only plant medicine that carries significant side effects and literal mortality risks if not used correctly with the right medical supervision and most importantly the right screening, right? Anyone out there who's still using, you cannot do Ibogaine while you have drugs in your system, right? You're getting urine tested. You're getting medically detoxed before you do Ibogaine. Trying to do it on your own or trying to do it with somebody who doesn't test you beforehand, recipe for disaster, because you can have a heart attack with this medicine at high enough doses. And if you have opioids and things like amphetamines in your system, right? Acute cardiac toxicity risk there. Yeah. So that's one of the key things that I want to make sure that any viewers who are considering Ibogaine come away with is like, Ibogaine is unique. It is not to be fucked with. It is worthy of extreme respect and should only be done in a medically supervised environment with people who know what they're doing, with the medical screening from an echocardiogram to EKG to a blood draw to look at your enzymes, your electrolytes, and of course a tox screen. Like anyone thinking of using this to get off their opioids, that you need to be clean to come off that. You cannot use some street drugs and then go right into Ibogaine. It doesn't work.
And kratom is a huge problem now, right?
Kratom's a huge issue. Yeah, this gas station opioid is such a problem. I get so many folks in Mission Within are showing up, and it's like I get guys who've worked for 3-letter agencies in the intel community. They've Green Berets who've done it all overseas, right? And they got shot at, they've been shot, and they survived all that, and they show up and this is bullshit they can buy at the gas station that's going to put them down, right? Yep. That's crazy. So yeah, it's pernicious, man. But meth, opioids, alcohol, all this stuff is just poison, right? And we're using it to what end? It's crazy. So we talk about
the bad thing about the kratom is that people think it's this natural alternative, but it's not. Especially with the using 7-0, they're taking that extract and taking the most powerful part of it, and and these guys are using massive amounts of kratom too. Some of them.
You're supposed to drink like half a bottle as the serving size, and I get guys who are showing up and they're like, "Oh, I drink 8 bottles a day." Right?
Oh my god!
There's a 6-week detox period for that.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, you wouldn't think it, Yeah,
and guess what?
So it's just like that.
We can't test for that on the urine test too, by the way.
No,
it's super risky. Yeah. Anyone trying to think they can get around it, yeah.
You can test it, right?
Not on the 12-channel urine test. You can't test for 7-OH. It might pop with other opioids. I'll have to check on that, but it's problematic for sure.
Because I know right before I went, the class before at Ambio, someone got popped, and he has to leave for 7-0.
I mean, that makes sense. We're typically going to be able to catch you in a number of different ways if you are trying to sneak one through. I had a guy bring fake urine.
Really?
Yeah, he was in such withdrawals that were like, I mean, I knew the moment I laid eyes on him he wasn't doing it. Still brought him down because we had to go. He showed up late after driving all night from Arizona to get there at rally time. And I took one look at him and I was like, no, there's no way this guy's doing Ibogaine. He was actively withdrawing from fentanyl, meth, and had MDMA in his system.
Holy shit.
He was not doing well.
How was he alive?
It was bad. It was real bad. I had to bring him to a different clinic the next day. I had to bring him down to New Path the next day because they actually had morphine and they could stabilize him. But he had a rough night. And he admitted it as soon as he got there. Like, I think when he saw the medical equipment and the nurses, and like our facility is like, it's non-clinical, right? There's obviously all the medicines you need to stabilize somebody if they're having a cardiac event. But we try to make it as non-clinical as possible. There's no one in a white coat, right? But as soon as he saw like the EKG machine, and he's like, I mean, we knew, but he admitted it, and it's like, dude, he's like, come on, it's Mexico. I'm like, you're right, it is Mexico, and these people are real serious about it, all right?
Exactly.
Like, our team has been working on the medical protocol for 26 years, refining each little bit of it, figuring out what's the right dosage, what kind of screening tools do we need to use, etc. No milk thistle beforehand, right? Like all these little things that you got to find out. There's only one way to find it out, right? Even the dosages, right? So how lucky are we to be able to come through this now, 2025, 2026, as opposed to 2005? Things were a little bit more wild, right? And huge amount of gratitude for the people that came before and then make this what it is. Usually it wasn't this smooth, right, in the start.
Oh, no doubt.
Crazier. But now, the safety-wise, like Mission Within, we've never had to escalate anyone, knock on wood, to the hospital or anything like that. We haven't lost anybody, and that's since 2017, since Mission Within opened, right? And that's because we make no compromises on the screening protocol. Yeah, it's extremely safe. It's not 100% foolproof, and we try never to rest on our laurels. But at the end of the day, if you prepare yourself correctly and you come to a reputable clinic, like it is safer than some people would have you believe. A lot of the deaths that happened with this were decades ago when it was all opioid addicts who were using Ibogaine. Up until 1963, 64 with Howard Lotsoff, Ibogaine was only used in a traditional sense in Ebola, in Bwiti, in Gabon. And then in the 60s with Howard, figured out that he was using opioids and went through an experience. A friend of his gave it to him just to have a psychedelic experience, and he realized the next day that, I'm not craving opioids anymore. What's going on here? And that was the eureka moment when they realized they can reset an opioid addiction. And for for decades.
Was that him and his wife who went down there?
This was Howard Lotsoff and Wilma Lotsoff. Yeah, Wilma's still alive. Howard passed away.
Okay, yep, I remember that. That story.
But, kind of the OG progenitors of this, and they were using it in New York, and then they had a clinic in they're doing it in the Netherlands a little bit as well. And this is in the 70s and 80s, went underground because of the war on drugs. Nixon, and then Deborah Mash was working with it in the Bahamas, treating opioid addicts. But primarily anyone using it in the West was for opioid addiction, right? And so back then they didn't know to do the EKGs and to look for the QT interval prolongation and to put magnesium in the IV beforehand to prophylactically keep that QT interval down. They didn't know to monitor real time, right? Like when you went through, you had EKG leads on your chest because there's a doctor monitoring your cardiac activity in real time the entire journey, right? That was not happening in 1970. It wasn't happening in 1980, right? So how lucky are we that the folks who went before us, they figured this out the hard way, right? And we're always iterating too. Like here's the key thing. Like when I first started, echocardiogram was not standard. Now, for the last 19 months, 20 months, echocardiogram is standard as part of our medical screening, right? Some places it's only if you have a cardiac thing. It's person by person case basis. Now, if you come to Mission Within, we're automatically giving you echocardiogram. And we will catch people with abnormally large hearts or with stenosis or with some low ejection fraction, which means they're basically in heart failure. That sucks to get all the way down to Mexico thinking, finally, I'm going to find some relief after all this suffering, and then to not be able to do it because of an undiagnosed heart issue. That's rough, but it ain't going to help you to be dead. To be able to off opioids, to have a mental health reset if you're dead, right? So we err on the side of caution.
Exactly.
Our number one at all.
How come you guys don't require them? Because Ambia required them as a part of the package. Like I had to send bloods and I had to send my EKG results. Like how come you guys don't do that?
We caught this with echo. It was a structural defect. You can't catch that with an EKG. So we only caught this because.
Oh, gotcha.
So yeah, the big distinction between EKG, which is looking at the electrical activity of your heart, and then the echocardiogram, we're looking at the actual ultrasound of your heart. So we're looking at the structure of it.
Oh, I got you.
Right,
okay.
so two different things there. So Ambia will typically, when I went through Ambia, I had to go to a different clinic and get the echocardiogram because I have an aortic stenosis. I have a congenital heart defect. Still was cleared for Ibogaine and things, but so we just make it standard now and we screen everybody with the echo. So not all clinics do that.
Gotcha.
And they only bring that up because it's just we're constantly iterating this. Right, it's a constant iterative process of safety improvements. We are always looking for new ways to make this better, to make it safer.
Yeah, I can see you're going to be ever evolving process.
We share protocol, right? Like, Ambio and Mission Within are peers. I wouldn't say we're competitors. We'll refer people over to Ambio all the time, especially if they have an addiction issue. Like we can't treat you here. We don't do detox anymore, but Ambio does, right? And a trusted partner, or Beyond, or New Path, right? Hell, I was at Trevor's house 2 months ago having coffee with him, right? Like we're not
right.
It's not Microsoft.
No, should you guys be? Like, unfortunately, there's a limitless amount of clients.
Information, sharing protocol, right?
Because
we want, all the big reputable Ibogaine clinics, we have a vested interest in making sure the other ones succeed. One, let's help people. What else are we doing here, right? Two, what happens to other clinics affects everybody, right? Most people don't understand the difference between Ambio and Mission Within and Beyond, or any of these clinics. They just think it's an Ibogaine clinic, and there are dozens in Mexico and Central America, right? But there is a distinction sometimes in the goal there. Typically a lot of the clinics are for addiction cessation, right? More of a medical procedure than a mental health reset. But to be able to do it in a cohort model with a group of peers who are all going through similar life challenges, right? And to be able to layer on 5-MeO-DMT or Bufo with that, I mean, incredibly rare sacred opportunity, right? Then, it just adds something to it, right? And I like to talk about it. I mean, there's just so much. I mean, that it's just such a sacred opportunity, and I really, really encourage anyone who's considering doing this and to joining a retreat and going down to be careful on the research you do as far as listening to all the podcasts and all the movies and things like that, because it can create a preconception for you of what you think this is. And if there's any one thing we can guarantee you is that it will surprise you, right? So try to minimize those expectations about what it is and what you're going to get. Your mind will do this. No one comes down without expectations. It's not about having no expectations. It's about minimizing them, right? And being as open and curious as possible, because everyone's experience is different. Right, some guys will make life reviews. Some people will have they'll have only an auditory hallucination experience where we got an NFL player whose journey was 12 jurors was talking to him all night, and he was each one of those jurors, right?
Really?
Other people, one of Trevor's staff went through, and her description was it felt like I was a TV that got unplugged for 8 hours and then plugged back in. Doesn't remember much of it. Still, the addiction cessation and brain healing happened, right? Still no. She woke up in the morning, went to have a cigarette, no chance. Doesn't want it. Nice. Right? So it's not like the Ibogaine didn't work because you didn't get this life review, right?
I talk about my experience.
It's about expectation management at the end of the day, but I would also really encourage people for that prep. Get your info, know what you're getting into, of course, right? Don't just show up because you have a free weekend. It doesn't work like that. And this is not for the faint of heart. This is a big experience. And this is typically people will rate this in the top 3 or top 5 life experiences, right? On par with having a child, right? That's how big it is. So approach that accordingly with utmost respect. Whatever preparation materials they're sending to you in advance, as far as diet and getting off medicines and substances and not drinking and not using cannabis and whatever they're telling you to do in preparation, it really behooves you to follow that to the T as close as you possibly can. You will fall short, of course. But at the end of the day, it's about respecting the medicine, and respecting yourself by showing up clean and coming correct, because this medicine will make you pay if you do not. And I know this from other medicines too. You show up all, Of course, you're going to show up anxious. Everyone does, right? I work here, and each time I go do a journey, like, yeah, I'm anxious because you're going in the unknown. You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, it's healthy.
The medicine is your ally. Of course it is. Right? It's a respect for the medicine. That's all that is.
Exactly.
And it's part of the process. Hey, don't be anxious. It's going to be fine. No. Be anxious. It's valid. But part of the process.
If you go in there cocky, there's a problem.
Yeah. And even the cocky guys, big guys, big egos. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Let's do this. My buddy said, I'm ready. Afterwards, they're like, dude, I was scared shitless. I'm like, I know, man. You're not going to fucking pull one over on me. Dude, I sat in the chair a couple times, bro. I wasn't always on this side of the chair, right?
Yeah.
I was on your side too, right? So I know what it's like.
Exactly.
You're not going to there's no reason to lie either, right? You just be authentically you.
Yeah.
Authenticity is everything. Because I promise you one thing, the medicine will bring that out of you. It is extremely cool, right? And there's no lying in this truth medicine. There's no lying to yourself, right?
No.
And so I think, it's the key thing. And, some folks, there's different levels of people in preparation, right, too. Some folks are showing up a little bit more desperate, right? Like, this is it, last chance. They think it's the last chance Hail Mary, right, to stay alive. Like, I've tried all the other stuff, all the pills, all the tramadol, all the benzos, all the SSRIs, the CBT, DBT, EMDR, whatever acronyms you want to use. And this is it. This is my last chance. Okay. All right. But even with that, let's try not to put pressure on ourselves to get a specific outcome of this, because again, I promise you the medicine will surprise you. You think you know what you need. I thought I knew what I needed. I was wrong. The medicine knows. At the end of the day, you are the medicine, right?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Right? And your subconscious, your unconscious, all that stuff, you have those tools. And so, just really encourage people who are interested in doing this to, familiarize yourself with it, but don't go down all the way in the rabbit hole and collect all these stories about it, because that can create these preconceptions of what you think it is. And then when you show up and it shows you something different, what do you think? Oh, I screwed it up. I did it wrong. They gave me the wrong thing or whatever. And especially in the group, because now you're hearing other people's stories and they're like, oh, I had this and I had that. And it's like, well, what did I do wrong? Nothing. You just needed something different, right? Your experience is your experience. It is completely different than anyone else's, and it doesn't matter what their experiences were. All right, but we want to compare ourselves and stuff like that. And the thing I say is, the only person, especially in the integration process, the only person worth comparing yourself to is not the other guys in your cohort who are maybe making some leaps and bounds that you're getting a little jealous of, but it's the old version of you before a retreat, you a year ago, right? That's the person to compare yourself to, right? Yeah, because that guy, you're a far cry from him, right? Comparing myself to me yesterday, it's a little tough. Comparing me right now to 8 years ago, when I almost died, when I couldn't even hold a pen to write because I had DTs so bad, man, okay, count the wins. Here we go. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Not all bad. But that's our negativity bias in our psyche, right? This comes from evolution, right? We're going to put higher value on a mortal threat than we are on a beautiful sunset, right? This tiger over here, we're really going to focus on that. That's a negative thing over there. The positive thing over here, that doesn't affect our ability to reproduce, right? That doesn't affect our survival. This thing does. So we have this inbuilt, this ingrained predisposition to focus on the negative, because that's our brain, it's our mind trying to protect ourselves. Thank you, ego. Appreciate that. You've been keeping us alive this long, but now it's time for you to stand down a little bit, okay? You don't need to control the situation. We're actually safe. We're going to try to leave a little room, not for the worst case scenario, but for the best case scenario. And especially with Ibogaine, it can be both. You can have a pretty rough journey, absolutely, no doubt about it. But what are you willing to risk for your aliveness, right? Yeah. You willing to put something on the table? If it was easy, everyone would do it. Exactly. But risk reward, right? And I used to say no pain, no gain, but now I like the saying, no rain, no flowers, right? You want the flowers? It's got to rain first, right? A little bit more woo-woo. It does. A little bit more hippie.
And some of that rain can get tough, man. I remember my 5-MeO. It's funny because my wife had been telling me for a few years to just let it go, just let it all out. And I don't think I ever stopped myself if I started crying, but I just couldn't do it. And then 5-MeO.
It's like a faculty that's not available to you, right? It's like it's I want to cry, absolutely. Yeah, but I can't. It's blocked, right? That's exactly. It's pulled out. It's disconnected.
And then 5-MeO, bro. Whew. By the end of it, I mean, I was screaming at my father, gesticulating, and I got done after my second journey, and I took my blindfold off. I was crying like a baby for 15 minutes, finally took it off, look at my coach, and I'm like, brother, I'm so sorry about screaming like that. And he's like, screaming? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, wasn't I screaming? He's like, nah, you were talking the same volume you're talking now. I'm like, was I motioning and pointing? He's like, no, your hand stayed at your side, but your fingers were moving a little bit. I was like, wow. I was screaming, crying at my father. And he's like, nope, basically just what you're saying right now. But internally, I released so much that had to be released.
Yeah.
It was just an ineffable experience.
Totally.
But that medicine is beautiful.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, there's nothing like it. And there's only one medicine that can follow up Ibogaine, right? Ibogaine being, both these are the two most powerful molecules in the universe, right?
Yep.
And so there's only one thing that could follow up Ibogaine, right? And that's 5-MeO. And there's a reason we do it in this order, right? There's a reason we don't do 5-MeO first. Sometimes you get sandblasted by Ibogaine. You get polished.
That's exactly what my coach said, bro. Ibogaine's the sandblasting, 5-MeO is the polish.
Yeah, or if you get excavated, you get hollowed out by Ibogaine, you get filled back up by 5-MeO. But even those analogies a little bit challenging because that's not always the case, right? And either one of those things, we need to go in as open-minded as possible. And a lot of folks come in being like, oh yeah, my buddy had this amazing experience on 5-MeO, and he met God, and it was pure love, so that's what I'm expecting. It was bliss. Okay. It can also be very, very challenging. Sometimes that sadness needs to be felt. It's just as valid as the bliss and the happiness, right? But if it's been buried too long, it needs to be felt, and that's okay. You're not doing it wrong, right? Something's not the matter, right? It's just different. And especially like here's the key thing too. When people are coming out of these experiences right afterwards, there's often this predisposition to jump to conclusions, right? We want instant gratification. We want results. Did it work? Did I get my answers? Were my intentions answered, right? These medicines unfold over days, weeks, months, years. Right, you're still getting these perspective shifts and these downloads for a lot of folks years later, right? But of course, the way that we're oriented, we want to know that day, did the Ibogaine work? So I talk with guys, okay, yeah, on grade day, yeah, you're gonna have some answers, some downloads, sure, but the medicine demands patience, especially on the back end, right? You got to be willing and able to do the work and be aware to pick up on some of these changes. They're subtle in the after, right? In the weeks and months afterwards. It's not always the big headline. Like, oh, I'm happy all the time now instead of depressed. If that happens, that's great. But sometimes it's like, oh, 5 months later, I didn't yell when someone cut me off in traffic. It's like, oh, it did work, right?
That's what it is going for me, to be honest with you, too.
Exactly, right? And so a lot of it can't even be expressed in words, right? It's just felt. You just have this different way of existing, of being with yourself and being present. So again, this is kind of about expectation management, right? And the way to really keep this going, because if you do nothing with this, right? If you come through the experience at Ambio or Mission Within or beyond or wherever, typically lasts for a couple weeks or up to about a month. That's the critical window or the critical period after Ibogaine. That's the longest critical window. And by what I mean by that is the time when the plasticity in your brain is highest, right? And this is the best chance that we have to create these habit changes. Whether they're physical habits, like more exercise and better diet and better sleep and less substances, or they're mental habits, right? Like negative self-talk and, some of those patterns that we get into with our thoughts, right? So both of those can be changed. But they're most likely going to stay or remain in that if they're worked on in that critical period, right? So for ketamine, it might be a couple days. For 5-MeO, maybe a couple days. For mushrooms, maybe a week. But for Ibogaine, it's typically a solid 4 weeks where that plasticity is really high. So it's really important in that critical window in that month afterwards to dedicate yourself to those integration practices and making those habit changes happen, right? And also letting people in your network and your support system know what you're up to, right? Because leaving the retreat, feeling great, good to go, back to work. Ooh, 3 weeks later, oh, what happened to that thing? I want to come back. I want more medicine. Don't be that guy. Do the work while it's fresh to make sure that you can sustain it, right? Because if you do nothing with this, you'll feel good for a couple months, and then you'll kind of revert back. Those brain changes will stay, right? Especially with the plasticity, with the TBI and CTE benefits, with increased blood flow to some of those places where there were lesions and stuff. Those will accrue. Those will happen, right? The addiction cessation reset will happen. If you can go use again, of course. But Ibogaine doesn't totally fix you. It gives you choice. It won't just do the work for you, right? You can go use afterwards. In fact, it's actually more dangerous if you do because now your tolerance has been reset to 0.
Yeah, everything's
The
reset.
old dose of opioids that used to be 50 milligrams of oxy. That dose is an overdose dose now, right? So it's really important people who, if they are going to go back on something, they reintroduce that slowly, whether that's cannabis for sleep. You know, your 20 milligram edible you used to take because you can't sleep because your mind's going like this all the time. You might be stoned after 5 milligrams now, right? People are kind of caught off guard by that. But those tolerances are generally reset by the Ibogaine. And yeah, you can sustain the benefits almost indefinitely though, if you put the work in. If you go do those meditation techniques, if you go dedicate yourself to yoga, to whatever it is, to even journaling, to listening to music. For some people, Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a great activity, right? Seems kind of weird, violent, but it actually, in the moment, you're getting energy out, right? For a lot of folks in the first responder veteran community, it works out well because they're still competing. But you're not thinking about work emails and things like that. You're in the moment, right? You have to be, otherwise you're getting so integration activities can be anything. Fly fishing, right? Whatever it is. Just don't go back to the screens and the work and the bullshit because those patterns can be even more deeply ingrained, right? So if you think about it like the snow analogy, right? You have all these, you know, all your habits are these tracks in the snow. Let's call it a ski slope, right? All these people have been going down, and these ski tracks are really well ingrained now in the snow. Ibogaine comes in and blankets that with a fresh coat. You have the chance to go trot a new path, cut some new paths, cut some new habits, or go right back to the old ones and make those even deeper, right?
Yeah.
It goes both ways. New habits, much easier to make them afterwards. Establishing or going back to old habits can be even more ingrained afterwards. We really want to be aware of that. We really want to be working with our coach and have a very intentional goal here of making sure we don't go back to that, right? So the intention is everything. I think that's probably one of the key things to kind of end with here, because I'm just tracking the time. I know we're a little bit past, is the intention. All of this stuff has to be done with intention, right? It's not about just going doing drugs in Mexico, and they're not drugs, they're medicines. It's not about symptom abatement, assuaging some symptoms, right? This is about real deep healing. We're looking at root cause stuff here, right? Not just papering over a symptom.
Yep.
And the intention is everything. So if you can go do these things recreationally, sure, all good. But if you come correct and you have a lot of intention in, I want to use these with respect in ceremony to create a better chance for myself to have that satisfying life, to heal myself, to become the best version of myself, it's going to make all the difference in the world. So the intention is everything, right? Anything less is just not it.
That's the truth. So well said. And like you said, you could do the medicine every week if you want, but if you're not doing the work, the integration, changing those habits, as Trevor says, make those 5-degree course changes, and in a year you're going to be so far off where your original destination was that you're going to be shocked. It's not, like I tell people, it's not this typical big 180 that's going to change things. It's going to be all these little things that you're going to do that's going to add up to this big thing. The medicine, like you said, doesn't heal you. It cracks you open. It gives you awareness, perspective. Yeah, you may not.
Day to day, you might not.
Other people will.
They should
guarantee that.
Yeah, 100%. But it may take you that moment 6 months afterwards to look back and, oh yeah, Trevor's 5% course correction each day, or even 1% each day. Yeah, I'm pretty far off the track I was on. And that's good, because the track I was on was going downhill real fucking quick. We know where we're going to end up, right? And so what I like to talk about, another same analogy for that, similar one, is dials, not switches, right? We're not doing these big on-offs.
Yeah.
Or good and bad. We're doing little adjustments each day. And those pay big dividends around whatever it is, 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road. But counting.
Essentially peeling back an onion is what you're doing, layer by layer.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate that analogy because I can't eat onions, but it's 100% right. I have like this weird allergy for it. But yeah, I mean, layers and layers, right? And to that, there's no shame in going to find more medicine after this, right? It may not be Ibogaine, because that's usually a once in a lifetime opportunity. One, due to the access and due to the cost, right? I mean, there's only so many spots. The waiting list at some of these clinics is months long, but also it's prohibitively expensive for a lot of folks. We have an associated foundation. We're typically not paying for guys to go through twice, right?
Right.
Some guys will come back for a second time and they'll pay out of pocket or whatever, or get a partial scholarship and things. And there are plenty of really good organizations out there, Seal Future Foundation, Rural Cards. That's there's all these groups out there who are helping folks pay. 343 fund for first responders. Yeah,
343.
But for a lot of folks, I really reiterate, look, I mean, there's a decent chance that you're only gonna be able to do Ibogaine once. I'm just
Right.
fortunate that I work with it. I was able to do it twice, but I'm under no illusion that I'm just going to keep accessing Ibogaine. Make the most of it, right? This could be it.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, know that there's other medicines where they can teach you something different too, right? It's not Ibogaine or nothing, right? It's not 5-MeO or nothing. Ayahuasca, as you well know, can teach you something.
Aya is my favorite medicine.
Right? Mushrooms can teach you something new as well, right? And,
Yep.
So there's all these opportunities to heal. The key thing is not to just rush to the medicine next time things get a little crunchy, right? 6 weeks after retreat, oh fuck, I yelled at somebody, things aren't going well, I just need to do more medicine. Not necessarily, maybe, but let's try to use some of those new tools we learned to deal with the problem before we rush back to that external crutch, right? So at the end of the day, I think a lot of what we're trying to do is avoid any external crutches and just being okay with what we already have in here, because we already have the tools.
Yep.
And choosing wisely then too. There's plenty of places out there where the way they serve medicine is a little bit different, right? There's not as much preparation, not as much integration afterwards. It's the experience itself, right? And that's fine. But I've had guys who show up to ayahuasca retreats in Southern California after doing Mission Within and I thought I was just going to keep doing big healing, deep healing with other guys who drove tanks in Iraq like me. But no, it's civilians who are looking for inspiration in their movie script. And it's like, it's a little different. I'm not ragging on that, but the intention is right. And so he ain't really going to share his trauma with the group if it ain't a bunch of peers who already know, right? And so just be careful with that. And there are plenty of really good groups up there. But there
Now,
are.
Mission Within, you guys have scholarships?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
I would say the vast majority of our folks are veterans who are getting their trip paid for.
Okay. So if someone wants to apply, is it missionwithin.com?
Missionwithin.org. Yep.
.org.
And our website has a landing page, and apply now. You throw your application in there, and then moving forward, that's when we look at financing. We have an affiliated 501(c), both Mission Within and Mission to Live Foundation were created by Martin Polanco. Mission to Live Foundation is a separate entity. It also funds scholarships we send people through AMBIO, or I should say, I'm not affiliated with Mission to Live Foundation at all. But they're paying for folks to come through Mission Within, but of course they're also paying for people to go through AMBIO or beyond, or another clinic called New Path, which is here in Tijuana. Cerrito actually. But Mission to Live Foundation, 501(c), and they're paying for folks to come through, sometimes with partial scholarships, sometimes with full scholarships. But access is key, and it's prohibitively expensive because it's not cheap to run these clinics with all the medical staff required and stuff like that. You can find.
What would like a full treatment cost for, say, a civilian that's not getting sponsored?
Now it's $8,000.
$8,000. Okay.
Yeah. Personally, I think it's the best bargain in the universe for what you get. But at the same time, definitely prohibitive, right? So it is absolutely challenging, right, to create better access for people who really need it, because the vast majority of people, myself included, couldn't afford $8,000 out of pocket for this.
Me either.
And so for veterans, it's a little bit lower, so it'd be about $6,500 out of pocket if they're paying full cost, if they're not getting a scholarship. So definitely discount there for veterans. And then, we have other offerings as well. So the Mission Within will do 5-MeO only retreats, which are less expensive. And then we'll also do mushroom and 5 retreats, just based on a kind of a case-by-case basis. And for some folks don't necessarily need to go right to Ibogaine, right? If you have if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you have Ibogaine, everything is Ibogaine. Not the case, right? Some folks are okay with mushrooms and 5.
I'm getting hit up a lot by people who are asking solely about Ibogaine, because that's kind of the word of the moment.
A lot of hype right now, Mike. A lot of hype about Ibogaine.
A lot of hype.
Right? But a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah, let's talk about all the medicines, because Ibogaine is the Mac Daddy of them all. And, they don't necessarily need them, number one, but I think they're most comfortable because they've heard that. It's most familiar to them, so that's the one they go to. Plus, you see all these guys on podcasts talking about it, but I call it. And maybe you want to just start with psilocybin, see how that works, and then go from there.
Depends on your intention as well, right? This is a key word.
Yeah.
For those folks moving into this is like the intention, right? And the first thing I do once they've cleared medical and talked with the therapist when they come to Mission Within is we do an interest circle and ask people, what brings you here? Why are you really here, right? Not because my buddy told me about it or because I saw it on a podcast. Like, what really brings you here, right? And so my buddy told me about it. It sounds cool. Is not a good reason to come do Ibogaine. Really, really not for the faint of heart. It's a big experience. No. It's incredibly sacred. So really have some intention, and if it's not the right time, wait a little bit while longer, right?
Yeah.
Wait till it really feels right. There's certainly folks who need to get to this. There's a level of desperation for sure. But for those folks that can wait, it's good to have a lot of prep and make sure that you're really stepping in here with the right intentions. That's key. It may not need to be rushed, even though there's a fair amount of hype and things like that. Some of the other medicines, can be a good stepping stone into it. I get plenty of guys who are going 0 to 100, never done a psychedelic. I've had Mormons who never smoked a cigarette, and the first thing they're putting in their body is Ibogaine. That is the true definition of 0 to 100. Pretty wild. But other folks, they've done all the other psychedelics. They're real psychonauts. And they'll come tell me, dude, I've done ayahuasca 100 times. They think it's a flex. I'm like, dude, if you've done it 100 times, like,
why?
Unless you serve it, like, if you're a maestro, it's fine. But, like, if you're just a guy, like, that tells me one thing: you're not doing the work in between those, especially if there's other medicines involved. If you're doing Io, then mushrooms, and then 5-MeO and all this stuff, like, okay, I'm glad that you're an enthusiast, but, like, you need to do the work between these things. If you're not, if that's what your intention is, to heal. If your intention is just to go experience them all, fine. But if your intention is to heal, you got to do the work between it, right?
Exactly.
And that is extremely, extremely key here. Martine, well, actually, I don't really need to get into his personal stuff, but a lot of the people that I know and respect in this space who've been working for a long time, they really don't do journeys anymore, right? They know now that a lot of their work is in this realm, right? In consensus reality. And it's true. That's something I take to heart, because, like, I never want to be a hypocrite, right? What I'm telling people who are coming in and out of retreat, I want to walk that walk as well. So this is why I try to limit my own exposure to medicine, and I just try to do a couple bigger journeys. I don't microdose. There's not a lot of evidence that it works. For some people, it's a game changer, amazing. But for other people, they're expecting this big benefit from it, and that doesn't materialize. That's disappointing for them. And I think one of the key things too is, like, are we just using this other daily external crutch? Well, I don't drink anymore. I just microdose every day. Well, not ideal. And proper microdosing protocols, ideally what microdosing is supposed to be is not a daily practice, right? It's supposed to be 8 weeks on, maybe every other day, or there's all these different things. But folks are always like, I want to microdose Ibogaine afterwards. Like, no. For one, what's your intention? If you're trying to assuage Parkinson's symptoms, okay, that's different, right? But right. So a lot of different stuff out there. There's all kinds of information on the internet, and word of mouth too. There's just so much info out there. It can be easy to get lost in the weeds, right? What's what, who's what, and which clinic is reputable and which one isn't. Challenging for sure, but
absolutely.
Yeah.
Brother, it is 7:37. I could talk to you for another couple hours, but you have a class to get to, number one. So let me ask you, if someone wants to get in touch with you, how could they do it? All the links will be in the bio.
Yeah, absolutely. So missionwithin.org, that's our website. That's our landing page. That's where the application is. Our affiliated 501(c), kind of a sister organization, the Mission to Live Foundation, missiontolive.org. And basically, the first step is to apply to Mission Within on our website, and then based on your funding needs or your financial needs, then moving over to different foundations. We don't just work with Mission to Live, like Seal Future Foundation, a couple other different ones, Task Force Dagger, Forward Intent, all these different foundations are funding folks to come through, right? So a lot of options. I would say that, especially if you're a veteran, don't let the cost and the price tag dissuade you right away. Oftentimes we'll do whatever we can to get even a partial scholarship. And it may not happen right away, but if new funding opportunities arise, then we can look at things down the road, right? 6 months from now or whatever. So try not to get too discouraged about it. But in the meantime, anyway, there's other resources out there where people can be redirected as needed. And, it doesn't always need to be Ibogaine, right? Sometimes ketamine clinics are everywhere, that's enough to get somebody through, right? And kind of just change the status quo a little bit, shake things up, maybe get a new perspective on things until it does feel aligned, until it does feel right to move into a bigger medicine, something a little bit longer, right? So, yeah.
Well said. Mm-hmm. All right, brother. It's been fantastic speaking to you. I thank you so much for coming on. Guys, if you like what you saw, please hit like and subscribe. And again, it was a great podcast episode. Mark, thank you so much. Guys, if you're going through it, hopefully you can identify with some of the things we were saying. Raise your hand, get help. No one's coming to help you, but you raise your hand. I promise you there are plenty of people out there who will. So we will see you guys again soon. Mark, thanks again, brother.
Or shot fire, officer down, shot fire, officer down. Got a city officer down, shot fire.
223, be advised, we have a visual on enemy paratroopers at grid Papa uniforms.
Welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation, a podcast dedicated to inspiring hope and healing for first responders, military veterans, and anyone facing PTSD and trauma